Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Turnip's Digest. We have I think this is going to be a very good send-off before Christmas. I have a feeling this will be a very entertaining show, due mostly in part by the fact that I am joined today by John from Knights of Dissent. How are you, sir?
Pretty good.
Very good. And we're also joined for the first time on this channel by RedHawk, the president of the Old Glory Club. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, Turnip. Thank you for inviting me. This is going to be a fun topic.
Yeah, and I'm very glad that you of all people could make it. This is I'm excited for this. I think we can put it that way. So, we have a very interesting and perhaps vague topic, if you want to put it that way. This is a something new that has arisen as a kind of a counter to a lot of trite sayings that have come out of the church recently, out of just Christianity in general. This isn't one specific church. I've just picked up the Lutheran response because it was laid out very clearly by a couple of well-known figures, and I don't know that many other churches have that available in the manner that we have here. So, what we're going to be discussing today is the red pill as it relates to Christianity and the drive for at least what its supporters are claiming are traditional marriage and traditional marriage norms. We'll get into if that's actually what they're advocating or not here in a moment. But this is going to be very interesting, at least for me, because one of the first introductions that I got into like anything in the dissident sphere was actually coming across this idea of a red pill, and whatever else, actually trying to examine the reality of the relationships and social dynamics and whatever else between men and women. And this is before I came across anything related to Yarvin or Academic Agent or anything like that. It was just something I came across online, probably in grade school, I think. So this will be interesting for me because I haven't actually dealt with any of this stuff in a long time, at least explicitly. So,
yeah, well, it's interesting you said that, Ryan, because finding stuff in the RP red pill space is often one of the first launching paths that a lot of guys have into getting into more like dissonant right topics, and it's been that way from the beginning. Like people look at the old Chateau Hartiste forums in the early 2000s, and people found their way to unqualified reservations by Yarvin because they were talking about relatively the same topics on those forums. And it's one of the first places where guys figure out, oh, I've been lied to about something, and if I've been lied to about this, what else have I been lied to about?
Right, and that's exactly sort of the thought process that developed for me, and I'm sure for everyone else, as you just said, was um, what you have is basically this giant community, this giant group of people, so, men and women in some cases, basically just saying that what you're told about how marriage works in the modern day, what you're told about how relationships between men and women work by the vast majority of people, is just complete falsehood. And in some cases, it's just a complete inversion of what actually happens. So it's quite the paradigm-shattering thing to just come across. Yeah, so it definitely makes you more receptive to other things potentially being false or inverted. So what we have today is we have a video that we're going to go over where a Lutheran pastor explicitly addresses this so-called red pill movement. I'm sure we'll get into who he chose as its representatives and if it's really representative or not whenever he starts to dig into it. And we also have a series of tweets here. And I don't want to become the channel that just digs and dives through people tweeting off the cuff. However, the tweets that we have on screen right now, I think, are very representative of a lot of what you'll hear from just about any Christian clergyman or pastor. It's basically the same boilerplate advice plus the same sentiments attached to it. That's why they're up on the screen now. So really, it's John and RedHawk. It's your guys' pick. What do we want to do first? Do we want to do the video or the tweets?
I mean, we can skim through the tweets first because I think it's a good framing to what we're about to get into.
Sound good, RedHawk?
Yeah, let's do it.
Fantastic. So, what everyone can see on the screen here, hopefully, is a series of tweets from a Lutheran pastor, Hans Feeney. This guy is not a nobody. He has a pretty decent online presence, certainly larger than anything that I have, and certainly a much larger YouTube presence. This guy reaches quite a lot of people, both inside Lutheranism and outside of it, reaching across quite a lot of different Christian denominations. And this is what he had to say on the subject. So if you guys want to stop me at any point along the way here and just comment, or we can dive into discussion, just say something and we'll stop to discuss. But originally, what he was picking up on that you can't see in this screenshot was this Twitter account named Smash Bales had posted, I believe, a editorial paper, or I don't think it was the study itself, where it had basically just said that women initiate the supermajority of divorces, and it broke down the possibility of a divorce by the demographic of woman that was involved in the marriage originally. And Smash Bales was basically just using this to say, be very, very careful about who you marry. Also, college women are kind of a trap in this regard. Hans Feeney picked up on this, and he said, according to the article, women initiate 90% of divorces amongst college-educated couples, who have much lower divorce rates than non-college couples. So you're still less likely to get divorced marrying a college-educated woman. The hammer-nail edgelord problem on display here. We can acknowledge that the American university is a massive problem and profoundly destructive in many ways, without terrifying young men into thinking that any girl that they meet in college is likely to destroy their lives.
Okay, well, let's just pause there for a second. Let's think about statistics for a moment and how they work. So you're supposed to come away with the opinion from Feeney's comment that a man who gets married in college is less likely to get divorced than just someone of his exact same social class would, not in college. But that's not true, because if you're looking at who's not going to college, you're not looking at the same demographics as the people who are. There's you're looking at much poorer people, and also from various demographics that we don't need to get into. So it's not really a fair comparison there.
No, and also at the same time here, divorce is only one metric for what actually constitutes a good and successful marriage. Well, okay, so you just ended the marriage, so therefore it's bad. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're having a good time in there and you're just sticking it out for the kids, right? So divorce is only one metric. What about actual marital satisfaction and happiness and long-term, prosperity of that marriage? So divorce is only one thing to look at here.
Right, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, as we keep going into specifics, but I don't think the three of us on this panel really have a unified solution to this issue. In fact, I think we're pretty diverse in our recommendations, but one thing that is true across the board, Christian or non-Christian or whatever else you may subscribe to, at least intellectually and spiritually, is that there is a place for divorce. It's just not the only remedy, ramification, or metric, as you said, RedHawk. So this is a very strange thing to latch onto. I don't necessarily know if the guy he was originally applying to made the same error, but you're absolutely right here in that this if we're just looking by divorces, then simply banning divorce would fix all marriages according to this view. And I think even they would realize the absurdity to this. It's basically just putting a bandage over the problem, focusing on this one most extreme manifestation of problems in the marriage, I think.
Yeah, and I'm sure this point is going to come up more throughout our conversation here, but it's like a common talking point throughout not just dissident spheres, but across, multiple spheres, that no fault divorce is one of the biggest issues that we have to deal with. And I kind of take a little bit more of a nuanced view on this one. I kind of go well, if you're going to get divorced, you might as well get it done over with and done really quick. Now, I'm not necessarily convinced that the fact that there's no fault involved is the real problem as to why we have so many more divorces occurring. I think it speaks more to the culture as to why people are going for divorce as the first resort as opposed to the last resort. And I'm not necessarily convinced that the fact that there's less paperwork involved is the reason why more people are doing it. I think it speaks to something a little bit more deeper than, oh, if we just change this one law, then all the marriages are magically going to become more successful. I don't necessarily agree with that.
Right, and even though I somewhat disagree there, and I'm sure we'll get into that at the end of the stream, just because there's some very exciting and fun things that we've picked out to read through. But um, that's right, and I'm sure we'll discuss this later. But even the traditional segments of the country, the supposed good Christians, seem to have internalized something that just was not present in most marriages a couple hundred years ago, or whatever else. I can't help but think that some of the problem might also lie there, and not necessarily in the um, in just divorce itself. Um, Also, since we stopped here on the second part, um, he's poking fun at this idea that any girl you how dare you think that any girl you meet in college is likely to destroy your lives? Well, why is that wrong?
Oh, that's just true, though. That's like just true. Have you ever been to a university before?
The thing here is, it's not necessarily that any woman would, it's that any woman
Right.
can, and that's
Exactly.
the problem here. You want to treat all guns as loaded.
Right, and this is something strange where we sort of have like an inverted Sharia society. It's not legally true, but it is realistically true that a woman's testimony is worth much more than a man's in court. And you can see this with the emergence of the Me Too movement and this supposed college rape crisis and whatever else. Basically, all it takes is an accusation and your life is ruined. This is an old talking point. It's stale. I'm not saying anything revolutionary here. The fact that this is just something that's known, at least instinctively by most people, should show that this downplaying of the issue here is sort of dangerous, if you will. If anyone takes this advice and just goes carefree into college, not actually understanding this, I think that this could actually get people damaged.
Well, this right here too is you're just digging a hole with this kind of stuff by trying to like forge statistics and numbers and to make a frame about how, the marriage system really actually doesn't have as many problems with it as people would actually think. And we all know this is bullshit. And so now I'm more inclined to not agree and not believe anything else that this guy might have to say about something a little bit more legitimate, like the teachings of the Bible or something like that. Like if you're coming in here trying to pull the wool over my eyes, so to speak, on this topic, which everybody knows something is going wrong. Like marriage rates are down historically to the lowest point they've ever been recorded in the United States currently. So this is just a bad idea all around. Like you're not fooling anybody with this.
Right, and I tend to see this problem with basically every other pastor in this in any Christian denomination really that wades into politics. Very few of them actually take a realistic view of what's happening, and it does tend to weaken their message. But as to the state of marriage and the rates and whatever else, he does address this. So I'll just continue reading here, and one of you two just unmute and say something, and we will stop and talk about it. So Feeney continues. I've been saying for quite some time that our culture raises young men to be losers and raises young women to be narcissists. It's an enormous two-sided problem that's killing our marriage and fertility rates. This kind of bitterness feeling ignorance doesn't help. Young women, you're going to end up wanting what our culture taught you weren't supposed to want. A man to provide for you and protect you. Girls, if you want a feminist cosplay until you're 30, fine, but recognize that your options will be severely limited the longer that you do. Young men, it's much harder for women to shed the lies of toxic feminism. Give them patience. Commit yourself to building a life where you will provide for them, and you'll be well positioned to do so when they figure it out.
All right, I have to stop right here. This part right here is one of the first things you ever learn when you get into the RP circles and how to fix your relationships and such. And we call these covert contracts. And a covert contract basically is, if I do this, then somebody else, if I do X, somebody else will do Y. And this is just not at all how relationships work between men and women. You cannot expect things to happen. You have to enforce things to happen. And the only way you enforce things to happen within your relationship comes from being the person who has more position of power in the relationship. And when you have options, you can enforce, your boundaries, whatever it is that you want. Because, we don't live in a patriarchy anymore, despite what all the feminists and the left wingers will tell you. So you're not going to have any societal institutions to back you up, so to speak. Like one of the things I see a lot of Tradicon guys talk about all the time is talk about, well, the Bible says X about what a woman should do in a relationship. Well, newsflash for you guys, that's not going to bind her to anything if she doesn't want to. Women do not have the same concept of honor, duty, ideology, viewpoints at all to the same degree that men do. So you're not going to bind them to these kinds of things. The only thing that you're going to be able to do to enforce your own boundaries is say, I will deal with this, I won't deal with that. And that just comes with, building up confidence, having your options open and available and such like this. But having this expectation that, oh, if I become this great man, then just by virtue, a great woman is going to show up.
No, that's true. I mean, look at Tom Brady. Like he just got divorced, right? Okay, Tom Brady is a millionaire Ubermensch. He's like an athlete of the arena. In ancient times, he would have been some great warrior. He's incredibly handsome, incredibly strong, and it sounds like his wife just cheated on him. So, I mean, no one in our audience, I'm guessing, is going to be richer and or more handsome than Tom Brady. So if he couldn't figure it out, and he couldn't, just through his natural abilities and wealth, couldn't enforce this, how is Hans Feeney expecting any of the rest of us to do that?
Well, I guess here is the this is going to be one of the major talking points right here for the rest of the discussion here. And this kind of goes back to what I think is the major issue here as to why we have marriage rates collapsing throughout the West. And basically where I'm going to come at this from is that the traditional institution of marriage is basically obsolete now. And the reason I say this is because traditionally marriage was used for the female perspective for protection and provisioning. And quite frankly, in the age now in 2023, soon to be 2024, women do not need this protection and provisioning from men anymore. They can go get it themselves, whether from the workforce, whether from the state, or however else that women want to get their protection and provisioning from. And so the traditional, a slot, so to speak, role for the man in the household was to be this protector and provisioner. And if that is taken away from you, okay, so what else are you to the woman? Why else is she going to stick around? So you can't really lead with your wallet anymore, as many of our ancestors used to be able to. That option is kind of closed off to you now. So now what is it that you have to be? Well, you're going to have to over-index in, let me talk about this real quick. So in the RP space, we have two kinds of traits that we like to talk about. We talk about alpha traits and we talk about beta traits. And this is getting memed all over the internet, and people have, bastardized the concept from what it was originally intended for. But essentially, alpha traits are traits that attract women to you, and beta traits are the traits that keep women around. Now, if you over-index in beta traits, this is what leads to more and more divorces, in my opinion. Most guys will let themselves go. They'll become unattractive. They'll stop lifting weights. They will start capitulating to their wife on basically everything. They're not enforcing any boundaries anymore. They're thinking that, oh, if I just don't piss her off and if I just capitulate to everything she wants, then she'll stop complaining or she'll be happy. It's not how any of this works. So in this day and age, when a lot of the beta traits, so to speak, are taken care of by women themselves, you just have to over-index in alpha in this day and age to keep her around, because that's the only thing she can't get from anywhere else.
Right, and this is very interesting as well. Going back to an earlier point that you made, and I think this is a whole situation right now that we have with marriage and relationships between men and women, is a gigantic proof that the law does shape society, and not just the law but also technology as well. With the confluence of the different legal reforms that we had in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, with the technology that we have in the form of contraception, whatever else. These conservatives seem to have failed to realize that we no longer have the environment that allows a traditional society built around traditional marriage to actually foster anymore. The structure is gone completely. So you can't just LARP your way into going back to how that was. If you just pretend that nothing has happened and that you're just going to have this very awesome traditional marriage where you have traditional courtship and whatever else, then everything will just be fine as it was 200 years ago or whatever. The structures aren't actually in place to do that. You're just going to get burned. And you can. I mentioned courtship. This is like a very salient proof of what I just said. The whole reason that you had these convoluted courtship processes and whatever, where you basically were playing both the father and his daughter for marriage, that only existed because the daughter was legally property, usually of the father. If you don't have that anymore, it makes no sense to do this convoluted process if you can just go straight to the woman. And if you don't do it, someone else will. This is just a kind of it feels like a case study to me of how the law just absolutely defines society. The structures aren't here anymore for traditional marriage, and Hans just seems to be recommending that people ignore that. Is that wrong?
Yeah, and this is how you get into the situation where, and I got so many stories to tell about this, where you come across a quote unquote Christian girl in her mid to late 20s who's, reformed here and is just coming into the church, and everybody is just falling over themselves to accept this woman and tell all the men to go in and basically, save her from her bad choices and such. Like, this is your only duty as a man in the church, is to save women from their bad choices and protect them. I mean, yes, should women be protected by men? Absolutely. As far as I'm concerned, like, that's the proper role for everything. But weaponizing that protector dynamic it's like one of the worst things you could possibly do in this day and age. And it's no wonder why guys are leaving the church in droves.
Right, and it's also no wonder why. And this was something else that I saw the other day. It was this woman, I forget who, was like complaining that she knew all of these great single Christian women in their 30s. Why isn't there just any good men anymore for them to marry? I
wonder why.
So, do you all have anything else to add, or are we ready to finish out the tweets here?
No, let's finish them up.
All right, fantastic. So he continues past that. And stop letting wretched narcissist girls on social media determine your views on women. There are good ones out there, but bitterness won't make you more attractive to them. It's a crappy situation you're in. Power through it. Don't give up.
I do actually agree with that. Yeah.
So this is I discussed this somewhat in my stream that I did on Kierkegaard. It's very dangerous whenever someone gets something half right, because they will throw out these things every once in a while where it's just sensible and true, basically, and it gives credence to everything else they've said, which is absolutely wrong. It would be much better if these people were just dead wrong or dead right, but unfortunately we don't have that. So
yeah, and if I was to throw a bone to the woman here, and not entirely dunk on them here, they basically are really getting a bad rap right now with the advent of a lot of these. Surely everybody has seen these absolute garbage podcasts like Whatever and Fresh and Fit, where they just find the absolute dregs of society for women and drag them in front of a podcast and just run intellectual circles around them and get them to say the stupidest things. And everyone gets the stereotype of, oh, these are all women. It's like, no, it's really not. I mean, listen, in modernity, men are lost and so are women as well. And there are plenty of women walking around out there that are just nervous wrecks all the time because they found, themselves in a mismatched evolutionary position for them, basically. They're neurotic. They're lost. They're all over the place. They have no guidance, and a lot of them are becoming shut-ins, basically. So there's still plenty of very good women out there. You're just going to have to look in different places than some of our forefathers had to, and you're just going to have to employ different tactics, as it were, to find them. But yeah, I wouldn't get blackpilled by seeing a bunch of, stupid women talking about some bullshit on a podcast somewhere.
Right, and I'm sure both of you would be immediately willing to say that you're probably not going to find this idyllic situation in the church itself, at least not as it's advertised.
No, because I'll tell you why. So there's these things called like women's Bible study or like women's group, women's youth group. There's like a special Catholic name for them in the Catholic Church. I can't remember what it's called. These are like second wave feminism, like propaganda machines intended to directly inject second wave feminism into women's brains. Yep. I have encountered much worse cases of second wave feminism brain in churches than outside of it, because outside of it you'll have women who are they kind of understand, like they're not totally delusional. They understand that even if they're engaging in certain behavior, they kind of understand that it's wrong. Whereas within the church, you have, I can't wait to be the boss girl of the house, right? I can't wait to get my husband to do what I want by withholding sex. That's seriously what they're just injecting this straight into their brains. Whereas like a lot of women actually out in secular society would be like, no, that's actually not a realistic expectation. That's not going to build a healthy relationship. But in the church, they get like this drilled into their skulls. So, be very careful with the girl at church. Very, very careful.
Yep. Now, go ahead, Ryan, and then I'll say something.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say this is interesting that you bring that up, John, because this is something that I was harping about, I think, a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks. All the days have kind of blended together in the last little bit. But Christians seem to have absolutely internalized the first wave of feminism, this idea that women are just basically masters of the house on their own. And that's where their power is supposed to come from, as if that's the moral arrangement, not necessarily factual, but how it should be. And then you go into the church, and you can't criticize the tenets of second wave feminism. After the first has been internalized, the second wave is now where the social and moral battle is. It's where it is particularly harmful to poke, because if you especially in these Protestant churches, if you criticize the habitual use of contraception or whatever that leads to these absolutely childless marriages, you're going to get shunned and probably ostracized from the group, which is a very second wave feministic thing to do. There's the idea that habitual contraceptive use is this sacrament, basically. But what were you going to say, RedHawk?
Yeah, there's a couple things going on here. Like John said, with these youth groups and such, and I've had plenty of experience working with them as well. They're definitely like falling over themselves to pander to women because they think like, oh, we got to get more and more women into the church here. And the other problem that this causes here is a total false expectation of what women actually should be within the church here. I recall somebody writing down something once and saying in the gospel, oh, yeah, well, the woman is subservient to the husband and the husband subservient to the Lord, right? Well, how is it now that the woman is being taught to be the spiritual leader of the house here? And in my experience, what these church girls tend to do is they tend to constantly be comparing the man to Jesus and God. And that causes severe problems in your relationship.
That's very common.
Yeah, that causes really, really big problems when the guy is trying to establish a frame in the household. And I know this is going to sound crass and probably not go over very well with some people, but as far as I'm concerned, if you're in a relationship with me, I am your God. All right. And you are listening to me. You're following my lead here. I don't need you to be rules lawyering with the Bible here into our relationship. That's not what anyone wants. It's not healthy. And it just has horrible expectations as to what the relationship should actually be like. And this is why so many Christian guys just will go and date secular women, because they're easier to deal with and they don't come prepackaged with this, oh, well, we can't do this because the Bible doesn't say this, or the Bible doesn't say that, or this is my interpretation of what Jesus said or something. It's like, why is the woman being a spiritual leader all of a sudden?
Right, and for anyone in my audience who might be taken aback by what RedHawk just said, we can take this exact same principle and transpose it to a different relationship within a household. Specifically, something like child and mother. If the child basically just had a Bible open every time they were talking to their mother, and was comparing her to the Virgin Mary or something like that, or the expounded virtues of any good biblical mother, and constantly pointing out the faults, basically using it as a means to undermine her authority, which she should rightly have over children in some fashion. every single time that she did something wrong. No one would stand for that. You're basically just using scripture, as RedHawk just said, for rules lawyering. You're being absolutely pharisaical. You're looking for these different loopholes that get you out from basically conforming to the to natural order. It's not how this works, and it's not how it should work between man and woman. So yeah, I've come across this quite a lot. Just where you especially in outside of like these sort of more high church denominations, I especially see this in like Baptist households and whatever else. If the husband does something wrong, they'll be lambasted over it, but they'll be lambasted in such a way that it sounds very scriptural, very very wholesome and pious, because it has all these Bible verses attached to it, all these appeals to Christ and whatever else. And it's being used to undermine the husband's authority, which is probably one of the most anti-Christian things that you could do within a household, is undermine the authority of the husband, considering he's supposed to be the head.
Yeah, and I'm sure obviously we'll be getting into this later, but yeah, if you want to go and pick and choose passages in scripture, I'm sure we could find plenty about how the woman isn't allowed to deny the man sex or any other such topics. But conveniently, none of those quotes seem to be, in any of these people's brains. I wonder why.
Right, and this topic keeps coming up. I assure people we will get to some of these spicier topics at the end of the stream. What do these older Christians and Scripture have to say about withholding sex in a marriage or adultery or whatever else? We'll get there towards the end. We'll keep going just a little bit here. I think we only have 2 little sections left until we're done with the tweets. So once again, stop me at any point. Hans Feeney says, I suffered crippling loneliness in college. Some of it was self-inflicted wounds, but much of it was that I couldn't find a girl who valued what I valued. I was bitter, depressed, and alone. What were you going to say, RedHawk?
I really see this a lot in our circles, especially like in the more religious and trad circles, is that guys have this expectation that they need to find a girl who matches all of their values and such before they even attempt to court her or anything like that. And this is just not how you should be going about doing things.
No, like women don't have like male opinions.
Exactly.
By definition.
Exactly.
Like, there are no based women out there. Women conform to their husband's beliefs pretty much. After a few years, most women at least should be simply mirroring their husband's beliefs on things. Like I don't, that's not a realistic expectation to go out and expect that you're going to find a girl who not only shares your like dogmatic theology, but also likes your your Warhammer figurines and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, that's such a, I hate that. I hate when people talk about like my wife tolerates my Warhammer. It's like,
oh yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I hate that kind of stuff. You'll see that stuff
seriously,
all the time.
like in all seriousness, like women are not going to share your opinions or even your values a lot of the time. That's just not how they're designed. They're going to have a combination of their father's values and the values that were drilled into them in secular education.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's up to, women aren't by their nature submissive creatures that conform to the largest power structure that they're under.
Yep.
And if you provide a strong enough power structure, she'll just conform to your opinions. Now, some women are just so far out, off the reservation, they're just not going to be fixed. But in most cases, like, you have to look for things that are actually going to be the basis of good values, not the actual values themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. You're looking for a woman who's malleable as opposed to someone who's like rigid in like certain ideologies of some kind. So the best way you could test for this is just by not giving in to what it is that you want to do.
Yeah.
And if she capitulates, great. If not, good. Move on to the next one.
Yeah. Look for stuff like, I don't know, she's good. She has a good like musical background. She read a lot of books as a child. She has a good relationship with her parents. Like, that's the kind of stuff that's going to like form the foundation of like a good wife someday, not she's not read Melanchthon. She doesn't share my opinions of dogmatic theology, and she doesn't subscribe to my base Substack or like, that's not. Who cares? Like, that women are not going to have those opinions.
Yeah, and also, even if she did have those opinions, like, you wouldn't want to hear them anyway. Like,
no, because I already believe them. I don't need to hear like this like shorter, higher pitched version of me repeating my opinions back to me.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing too is that we talk about this all the time in our circles, is that can women ever truly like really be based? Because like at the very end of the day, like being based comes down to being able to exert violence, and women just really can't do that at the end of the day. So that like you'll hear this all the time online, like where women are talking about like some right-wing values or right-wing opinions or something like this. It always seems like they're kind of LARPing when they're talking about it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, you know, that they're speaking about this kind of stuff, but you could just tell like, yeah, you're never really going to get it. So why do you expect her to, or why would you even want her to like fully share these things? Guys thinking in their head, like if the woman is just a complete carbon copy of me, then that means like she's not going to leave, you know?
Wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Wrong.
That's
Incorrect opinion.
And this is I've been of the opinion for quite a while now that basically the best that you can find on this front in terms of opinions and whatever else is apoliticism, or whatever the equivalent of that would be for any other strongly held opinion, just because it's probably the best starting point to work with. If you find someone who is trending in either direction, usually it's very difficult to stop whatever the trend was before you got there, or at least that's what I've experienced. So perhaps I'm wrong there. Maybe I've just come across a few outliers, but I have also seen this despair, basically, that you can't find a woman who is extremely esoteric in her political beliefs and whatever else. And I've been unable to comprehend since I first came across it why you would want that. Are you just going to sit alone every evening talking about the fine details of Julius Evola and Thomas Carlyle? It sounds very boring, to be perfectly honest. It's
ideal marriage.
It sounds very masculine.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but we'll continue just there. After Hans says that he was he couldn't find a girl who valued what he valued, he was bitter, depressed, and alone. He says, then 18 months after graduation, I met one girl, and my life changed forever. One is all it takes.
Smiling Chud Jack. Holding the ice cream cone.
You know, like, in normal times, this, you know, statement right here would be more acceptable. But unfortunately, in the age that we're living in right here, this talk about the concept of the one tends to be very, very dangerous for guys, particularly people coming up from a more Christian denomination, because it kind of just fits right in to this idea we were talking about earlier, these covert contracts of, oh man, God finally provided me with this girl. I was working so hard and the stars aligned, and she's my preordained one just for me. And so often this kind of comes into what we were talking about earlier. It's not that she was preordained for you, is that the church now has been subverted to accept and cater to all of these women that traditionally would not have been put front and center for you as marriage material. And this is the one that kind of just falls into your lap. This is kind of like my gripe that I have with people who like marry the first girl that they ever meet kind of deal. And I think there is like a lot of romanticism around young love and such, and it could definitely work, you know, if you're lucky enough to have that. But in this day and age, that opens up your flanks, you know, so to speak, to, you know, be attacked.
Right. And just real quick here, my internet may or may not give out at any point in time, so just continue on if I do drop out here. But I think this is very damaging, just because it's not true that necessarily true rather that these marriages or whatever else are just preordained. Like this one person is just for this one other. We aren't told that in any sort of infallible authority. Certainly not Holy Writ or anything else like Hans Feeney or myself or any other Christian would believe. It's not how it works. So concocting this sort of a false structure where you believe this is you're going to come in, you're going to hit the wall of reality at some point if it doesn't work out, and you're going to be exceedingly devastated, more so than usual, because your delusion about this idea of having this one preordained wife or husband or whatever else is not how it actually works. You know, you're never actually given that promise. I think there's like maybe a couple of religions that give that promise, and none of them are Christian, really. So
Yeah,
It's
one of
like,
them that gives the promise encourages people to go blow themselves up. So, uh, yeah,
well, even then, that's like ethereal wives. Like that's not
exactly.
even that's not even material. Like I think there's a I think some parts of Hinduism might believe this idea. There's some preordained marriages that are supposed to take place. I think there are some like fundamentalist Mormon sects as well that will go into this, but Christianity and the Christian world most certainly does not actually have this idea. Even the Romanticists from 200 years ago didn't really go this far. They just they viewed this fiery romance as like a very rare thing that only a select few lucky individuals have. Usually the most superior out of the population would come across this sort of noble romanticized preordained marriage or whatever. So like even the romanticists who often get blamed for this idea, I don't think went this far. Um, but we'll finish out here and then we'll comment and move on, I suppose. Hans Feeney says, as his last bit of advice, work out, eat well, dress well, be as good looking as you can be, go to church, pray without ceasing, try to find a sanctified woman in the place they gather, the house of the Lord.
Okay, well, first of all, like, his profile picture is him, like, slunking down on some heinous slop. So, this is just kind of funny in context, but sure, yeah, you can do that stuff.
I am reminded of Stefan Molyneux's like quote that he would often throw out, like the Fat Man's Diet book. Are you going to follow it, or do you just distrust it? Kind of a similar thing that you're pointing out there.
Yes, I would not be caught dead. If someone tried to take a picture of me eating slop in that fashion, it would be like an MTV, like late night hidden camera video. I would be charged with multiple felonies if someone tried to take a picture of me eating like that.
Yeah, it's just a weird choice, you know. But I mean, his points in the beginning about like working out, eating well, dressing well, and such, and looking as good as you can. Yeah, that's great advice. And then, like we were talking about earlier, about like half truths. Then the back end here is like find a sanctified woman in the place they gather. I mean, yeah, maybe that works out for you, maybe, but you can't just expect like, oh, because the woman shows up to church, then somehow this woman is like better qualified for marriage than secular women. I vehemently disagree with this. You know, the things you need to be testing for, like we were talking about earlier, is like malleability and such. Like, is she comfortable around and speaking to men? Is she comfortable following around a man? And there's many things you could do with this to like test her for this in like your opening days of like dating and such like this. One of the things I tell guys to do a bunch and works pretty well is one of the things you could do is use multiple venues for the first date. So something to the extent of, okay, we're going on a walk somewhere. Tell her to meet you here at this time, a certain day. I often will tell a chick what to wear, but you don't necessarily have to do that. And you'll just go on, yeah, and you'll just go on a walk and you're leading her through something. It's like a subconscious thing, like, oh, I'm going to follow this guy. And you could say, oh, let's go to this place, or we can go to this bar, or let's go and have a coffee at this place. And you could just make it up as you go along here. Oh, let's go walk into this little shop over here and see what's going on. Is she comfortable following you around? Is she fighting you every step of the way? Is she complaining? Like, these are the kinds of things that you could be looking for on the first date here. Not necessarily, she's praying in the front pew here. That must mean she, is going to be the perfect little housewife that stays at home and keeps my balls empty and my stomach full. I don't know about that.
There's an interesting bit of wording here if we're talking about the back end of his advice, because what he says, basically up to go to church, and depending on the church, that's not even guaranteed at this point, is good advice. And then notice how he says find a sanctified woman. He's not telling these young men in their prime to look for a virgin who isn't spent. Basically, he's telling them to find a sanctified woman, a woman who cares about her past. She's a child of God now. She is basically good, because she has been to church and prayed and been baptized and whatever else, as if that erases the physical and psychological reality that is all the things that come with marrying a non-virgin. You have all these issues with pair bonding, higher rate of potential divorce or whatever else. Once again, divorce not being the only metric that something will go wrong, but it certainly is one. This is it's a weasel word, basically. It sounds good. It sounds very pious. But he's basically just telling men to settle.
Yeah, it's just a filler word. Like you could put again, like what I was talking about covert contracts here. It's like a sanctified woman is illy defined, and you could just put whatever fantasy you want and attach it to that word. I mean, I guess we can have different conversations as we go down the line here about virgins and such like that. But we could continue. I'm sure that topic will come up more.
Right. So, any last thoughts here before we're going to move on to a different Lutheran pastor after this, unless you guys want to comment more on this.
Upsie, did we lose Mr. Sneed?
No, I think he's still here.
Hello?
Okay. Oh, no. Okay,
yeah.
He's back.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, unless you guys want to comment more on this, I have a second little bit before we come back to the spicy quotes that I have picked out for us.
Sure. Carry on, Ryan.
Alrighty. So, let me just move that. And this next bit that we're going to be listening to is from, and this will probably be the last time he appears on this channel for quite a while. It's going to be from Jordan B. Cooper, and the only reason that we are picking him the second week in a row now is because he's explicitly addressing this terrifying reality that's materialized in front of him of red pill people telling young men not to get married, and how this is a very very terrifying and evil development.
Jake Coops. All right.
So the way that this will work, RedHawk, John, I'm sure that you remember from the last few times, is just unmute and say something, and I will pause the video, and we will just comment on anything that was said. You can, we can interrupt anywhere between a few seconds. We can let him keep going. Doesn't matter. If you have something that is worth saying, just say it, and I will pause the video. Ready?
Sounds good.
Cool. So hopefully this is the right one here.
So I've mentioned a few different times on various videos and podcasts that I have some issues with the trad.
Okay, no, that's the wrong one. Sorry. Ignore that. We'll go to the other one.
There has been a just recent blow up online, as there always is about something about the issue of marriage, and recently some of those in the so-called red pill community, those who are upset about feminism and are discussing the problems of feminism in our society, have started to speak out against marriage, really encouraging young men just not to get married at all, because the supposedly statistics about marriage are so bad that most of them are unsuccessful, and therefore it's not worth the risk. So you just shouldn't
supposed statistics, eh?
Yeah. So I was about to pause it myself there. RedHawk, is that like a fair summary of what the red pill community, or whatever you want to call it, whatever the collective mass of people that accept reality is that a fair summary of what they believe and say?
So the first point I would stop this man with is saying that, the red pill is just a group of men in opposition to feminism. No, the red pill is 2 points. It is positive male identity and male sexual strategy, and that's it. There's no reference there as to talking about feminism or being anti-feminists or anything like that. Now, it comes up most often, in our spaces and such, but the organization, well, I wouldn't even call it an organization, the subculture, so to speak, is centered around giving a positive space for men to swap notes and ideas. And it's just a place where we also don't shame men for, their masculinity, so to speak, because all the other traditional spaces, throughout the entire country and throughout the entire West have just been completely subverted at this point. So it's a space where you can go in and you just talk about any male issue, and there's not going to be, any rules lawyering or any, judgment basically about, you're not supposed to do this because a man's supposed to do this. It's like, no, we're here to swap notes. And if you want to, fuck up your life, that's on you. But, we've got notes for that. I mean, and I guess the other thing I'll say about this, about, certain guys within the red pill sphere talking about don't get married. Yes, there are very vocal factions within the red pill community that do talk about and encourage men not to get married at all. But you will also find within the community entire groups of guys who are actually in marriages or in relationships, and they just want to figure out how to fix things like oh, the wife, is gaining weight, and how do I get her to lose weight? The wife is withholding sex. The wife is beating the kids. The wife's in-laws are causing problems in our relationship. The wife wants to go and get a career. All these kinds of questions come up in the married red pill forum, which I personally think is where most of the best advice in the entire space can be found. And then within that as well, you even have Christian denominations of, the red pill space. My mind goes to an old poster by the name of Dalrock, who was a very prolific poster on the old married red pill forums, and he even had his own blog. And he came from specifically a Christian context here. And thank God his blog has been saved. He actually nuked the entire thing back in 2019 or 2020. But through the work of some guys like Rollo Tomasi and others, they actually got in contact with him and said, hey, you know what? If you don't want to post anymore, that's great. But there's a lot of amazing stuff in your blog. Like, can you actually keep it up? And he actually did go back and he kept the blog up, even though he doesn't update it anymore.
Right, and this is I'm glad that you mentioned the different like sub varieties, if you will, of this of these the different people that are inside this line of thought. Because I remember, I think my first impression, like, like talking about the first like hour or so of reading through these guys' posts and whatnot, was that it was just a bunch of pickup artists and whatever else. And then I actually started to look at what they were saying, and just a little bit deeper. And it turned out a lot of these people had like families and children. It was a little bit different from the men's rights activists and whoever else, which were typically just burnt, divorced men.
Yeah, and they complain, which is all that men's rights activists do. But yeah,
right. And this is so it was very much different in the fact that these people were just basically just looking through, what is factual reality, and then how can I after understanding this, how can I adapt to basically keep my marriage afloat, keep everything happy and healthy with me, my wife, my children, and our wider extended family.
Well, yeah, and this is the thing that I always lob at the accusation about how, like, oh, the red pill is steering people away from Christianity and everything like this. And as far as I'm concerned, like, if the churches, if the traditional institutions actually did a good job of what they say that they do on paper, the red pill would have no reason for existing at all. But the fact that these other organizations have failed is why the space needed to, be founded in the first place.
Right, and this is I'm glad that you mentioned this, because I tend to see the opposite. I tend to see that people that understand these sort of like red pill dynamics and whatever else, things as they actually are, not without any sort of a value attached to it. I tend to find that they make very very faithful Christians. They certainly will just say something that is scriptural, something traditional, if you will, but that is very unpopular, and they won't really be afraid of the backlash. They'll actually dig into these things as they might have been believed 200 years ago, and they aren't going to just conform to some sort of a societally filtered truth, in quotes, basically. They tend to be much more diehard in their faith.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's been my experience as well, too. It's like, whose frame are you following? Are you following your frame or your priest's frame? And in many cases, like, these guys will become like you said, Ryan, like your most diehard, Christian advocates, as it were. But also at the same time, like, they're not going to pull any punches here and say that their own house, has no issues that needs to be solved. They're very honest.
Right, and that's part of what makes them diehard. They're willing to look at not only just the problems outside, but also the problems at home that could be, negatively impacting them and their vision of the things outside. So that was a good thing that I like came across pretty early on, and it was articulated to me much later, and I forget by who now, because it was probably a couple of years ago, that all of these red pill guys turned Christians, or maybe even Christians from the beginning, they tend to be the only ones giving actual real advice about how to be, a young man in the modern day. You don't actually really find that very much from 99.9% of pastors or priests or whoever else, youth counselors, whatever your church has. You don't really get actual advice. You get idealism, and it would be nice if things would work this way, or things should work this way. You won't actually get told how it works. So that was something that I think they're pretty good for. John, what were you going to say?
I mean, I I've never really been into like red pill stuff. This is just my lived experience. I like that term. It's I'm recapturing it from the left. This is my lived experience, and it's just sort of true. Like I've never like consumed red pill content, except when I was like 16. I watched a couple of videos by this guy called Alpha M, and I thought it was the like cringiest shit imaginable.
Oh yeah,
But
95% of the space totally is at this point. But continue.
so I didn't have a very good impression of it, but this is just true. Like a lot, like even if like a lot of the red pill sphere I think are just total like moral degenerates, they're still like correct. And like young women should be forced to watch their content just so they know that like the men that they're going to go sleep around with like essentially despise them. And I think just for that reason alone, it's like a net positive because it's just so honest. I think Andrew Tate should just be required viewing.
Yeah, that was a pretty interesting idea that you posed to me. Just basically not necessarily scaring people out of sleeping around or whatever else, women specifically, but kind of just psychologically conditioning them to the
yeah. You should know that like this like weird gypsy guy on YouTube, like that's basically like what men think of you. That's what men think of you. That's honest.
I would push back a little bit because like a lot of it is intentionally out there in order to get clicks and views and such. And
yes, yeah,
and also this is one of the things that we established in the very beginning of we call it your MAP, your male action plan, basically. And what has to happen in so many cases is because guys from age like 2 basically are indoctrinated in feminism and told to be basically defective women throughout the entire school system, most all of the churches, the entire government, the entire social media, the whole media apparatus and such. So one of the ways that we found is most effective to kind of snap guys out of this is to just more or less like make them hyper misogynists, and you have to swing the pendulum so far in the other direction that after the guy gets through his anger phase, which typically lasts like 6 months to a year, ideally. Now that seems to be extended these days at around like 2 years because people are being catered with this anger phase content, like your Fresh and Fits, your whatevers, your Andrew Tates of the world. But yeah, anger is the natural emotion for men. And once you kind of get through your anger phase, you can kind of settle back down into the medium area and kind of, still be like, my buddy Ryan Stone calls it. He's like, you have to hate her, but just a little bit.
And this is interesting as well for 2 reasons. You mentioned that you basically have to become a misogynist in order to internalize the lessons that are being learned here. That reality is not as it was delivered to you for the majority of your life, and it's true. And I don't think that anyone can find anything morally wrong with it because misogyny is not actually like a moral sin in any religious system. It's something that's been entirely invented. So, like, I know for certain people like Hans Feeney and Jordan Cooper would absolutely recoil at the idea that you could ever recommend that a man become in any way misogynistic. But it's not actually prohibited.
Yeah, well, you have to, right? Because like if you're supposed to lead, like you can't be equal. Leaders are not equal to the people that they're leading, right? So you kind of have to be snapped out of this role that you were put into since birth. And then you can kind of settle down into the medium here. It's like people got this stereotype of like what like a patriarchy or a man leading the relationship is supposed to be like. It's like, oh, he's just sitting on the couch drinking his beer and the woman is barefoot, naked in the kitchen, making him sandwiches all the time. And when they're not having sex, it's just ridiculous. You settle down to a happy medium when you're like, okay, I understand how women operate. I understand, what tasks she's, most qualified to deal with, where her skills lie in. They overlap over mine. Maybe she's better at something than I am and such, but I'm still in charge. I'm still leading the interaction and such. Like this isn't, remotely as, totalitarian as, people are made to believe. Right.
Right, and then the other thing that I was wanting to say here as well is that this idea that anger is the natural male response or the natural male emotion, and that's something even like scripturally recognized. If you read, you can't have an honest reading of the Psalms and not come away with the idea that you are supposed to have righteous anger somewhere. as a man, let alone just as a Christian. And this is something entirely absent from the churches. And once again, the only people that I know that talk about this are either rabid traditionalists, which is like, and I don't mean like Jordan Cooper, Hans Feeney types of traditionalists. I mean the ones that are actually unfashionable. They won't get invited to the fancy conferences because they're seen as too, untouchable, basically due to their traditionalism. It's either them, that tiny minority, or another tiny minority of people who have actually gone over this material before. They understand what we're talking about right now, and they are also Christians. Those are the only two groups I know that will talk about a correct place for anger. Everywhere else in the church, including from these more mainstream so-called conservative types like Cooper and Feeney, will treat anger as a defect or as a sin or as a vice, which is you can't give an honest reading of Scripture or of what a man is and come away with that idea. It's treating them as defective women.
Yeah, exactly. Like I was talking about before about the red pill space being a spot for positive male identity. It's like, yeah, we acknowledge that the default emotion for men is to get pissed off and angry about things. And rather than having this, bullshit crybaby, it's okay to be a pussy and cry response to that you get from everyone else, we say, okay, yeah, you're pissed off about something. You totally have the right to be pissed off about it. Now, how are you going to channel that anger into being productive and making it serve your own ends? We're not teaching you to suppress it. We're teaching you to be productive with it, which I think is a much better response.
Right, and that's you don't even have to be red pilled to come to that conclusion either. That this is the best response. If you like sequester one specific emotion that is inherent to anyone, let alone just men, and you keep that as the untouchable emotion that you're never supposed to have. If you come across it, you're broken, it's over, and whatever else. You're just making yourself defective. You should actually be able to align your emotions into something positive, something productive.
Exactly. And imagine if this shoe was put on the other foot here for a second. Let's just pretend that all of a sudden that women, their natural emotion for crying was suppressed somehow by all the institutions and everything, and women were told to be super hyper masculine and everything. That would turn off every single guy in the entire world. Like, we wouldn't be attracted to that. And it's the same thing with women on the other side. Like, people will know this stereotype all the time. I mean, you see it everywhere. It's like some of the guys that women sleep with the most of are like convicted felons. You'll see this like anytime, like even like a school shooter happens, like the guy will start getting letters and stuff from women in the mail and everything, and everyone chalks this up to like, oh, it's those damaged girls or something like that. Well, I kind of argue, like, if it happens enough, in enough circumstances and enough cases, is it really damaged, or is it speaking to something that's in the lizard hind brain here from our ancestral past, where, if you saw a man that could literally crush his enemies and see them driven before them, the girl gets a little wet for it.
It's the question, why do women like serial killers?
Yeah, exactly. And
So-
every single woman on planet Earth watches true crime dramas, which should tell you something.
Right, exactly. I hadn't. I'm sure that's probably some old talking point by now, but that's a fantastic way to illustrate it. So, I think that we'll keep going here. Once again, just say something and we'll pause.
At all. Now, and I've said this before, that I think that when you're looking at the red pill movement, and largely very young guys are attracted to this, and I get why, right? But I've said this before that I think, and recently.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I meant to pause that and I accidentally rewound.
Not true at all.
No, we've got guys of all ages in there, and most typically, especially when you get to the like the married red pill forum and such, it's guys who in their late 20s into mid 30s mostly. But we also have guys in there that are in their 50s, 60s. It's literally a space for guys of all ages.
Yeah, and this is something else that I don't think I ever characterized it as like a young person's movement ever. Like 2015, 2016, like the people that I was seeing, they all said they were like 40 something. It seemed to have been quite a lot of people talking. Some in the next largest group would have been in their 30s.
Yeah, I mean, I watched a guy on YouTube one time, and I think he was like in his 60s. He had like a white beard and was talking about like manosphere red pill stuff. And he was like, in the comments, it was like mostly guys who had been divorced and were like in their like 40s to 50s.
Yeah, that was the first wave of all this kind of stuff. Like the first wave really was guys it actually started in like the blogosphere days in the late 90s, and it was guys who were basically like divorced and everything like this, who got shoved through the meat grinder basically. And now I will say to this guy, the space has gotten younger over time. Like younger guys are finding it every single year, largely because I think like the problems with the relationships between men and women are just becoming unignorable at this point, and people have access to this information before. I think what happened a long time beforehand, like back in the analog days, guys would basically be confused for maybe about like 10 to 15 years of their like early adulthood basically. And then they kind of just like threw their hands up in the air. It's like, well, what the hell am I doing wrong here? And then they found themselves, on some obscure forum or something. But now everybody could just open up Twitter or open up TikTok or something, and you're going to find this material. So,
and it's not just that these like the fact that relations between men and women are going wrong. It's not just that it's ubiquitous. It's a natural part of life for a lot of young people. Just if you ask, especially the more advanced students in any school, like, are your parents divorced? The answer is pretty likely going to be yes for the vast majority of them. Like I remember I helped start my high school's mock trial team, and I don't think that there is a single student on the team and had students in the double digits. Like that's how much people we're talking about here, all pretty intelligent. I don't think there is a single person who had parents that were still together. Like there was I think one or two whose parents never even married in the first place, and the rest all just had divorced parents. None of us liked that arrangement. We all of us knew that something was wrong. Atheist, Christian, pagan, whatever else. We all knew that was not a good place to be, to have this amount of this much broken families to be so prevalent. So like this, it's a fact of life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's how I first got into RP circles, is because when my parents split, I was in my late teen years. And basically when I got to college, I had it in my brain that I was going to do, everything I could to not end up like they did, So I went down a, very traditional, path for, my college years. And it honestly it just completely fucked up my relationships with women, to be honest. And this is basically why it's a major factor as to why I've been turned off to much of the churches throughout my, adult years here, while also, I know it's very cringe, but I adopted the term non-denominational for the time being, even though I know it's like a really stupid term and everything. But yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't think you're the average non-denominational. I doubt you would be telling us about the evils of the Southern Baptist Convention if we asked your convictions.
Never.
So,
Yeah. I never discourage people to, follow any faith or be Christian or anything like this. Like where I just come through in this, side of the debate is just, hey, like be wary of the Christian women and what they're telling you in churches as to is the most effective way to have a healthy relationship. Because every time I tried to court a Christian girl when I was going to church, it just blew up in my face every single time.
and I'm sure you're not alone. And the fact that this is a story that most people can understand, let alone the amount of people that might be able to sympathize with it, might be a good wake up call for the clergy to get real. I think would be the best way to put it. So I accidentally screwed up the timing that we were at. I don't think we were too terribly far through. So we'll see if I got the timing wrong. We'll keep going here.
That most of them are unsuccessful, and therefore it's not worth the risk. So you just shouldn't get married at all. Now, and I've said this before, that I think that when you're looking at the red pill movement, and largely very young guys are attracted to this, and I get why, right? But I've said this before, that I think that the challenges that they are responding to are challenges that are really significant and important in our society. But the answers that a lot of the red pill type movements and influencers, people on social media give are just extremely harmful to young men and extremely harmful to society. And
okay, so I think this is a pretty dire misunderstanding. RedHawk, what is the red pill position on how to fix society?
Yeah, there isn't one. It's a praxeology, not an ideology. It's a set of tools. If you go into any of the red pill forums, or if you talk to any of the legitimate guys left in the sphere, and more or less like the guys I would include in that are the people that hang around the Rule Zero crowd. So like Rollo Tomasi, Troy Francis, Ryan Stone, I mean, well, myself, I've appeared on Rule Zero a couple of times, but I think those are pretty much the only guys left on the content creation side that are actually sticking to, what the Red Pill was originally meant for. But yes, like you go on any of the forums, you talk to any of these guys, you will get multiple different opinions as to what's wrong with society, and multiple opinions as to how you as a guy could be successful within it. There, you will find Red Pill posts about how to, run a rotation of girls. You'll find Red Pill posts about how to engage in pickup artistry. You'll find Red Pill posts about how to fix your marriage or how to, cheat on your wife. Like, you will find all of these things here, and it's incumbent on you as a man to figure out what is most important for your life and what you actually want for it. So like, we trust people to actually be adults here and graft things onto your own life, kind of like how men are supposed to behave, instead of just telling them, oh, you can't do this, you can't look at this, this is horrible, this is shameful. It's like, well, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this, but this is how some of the other guys have done it. Here's the notes they've taken. Maybe this will work for you, maybe it won't. But we trust people to actually be intelligent enough to, forge their own path, so to speak.
Right, and the point with all of that you just said there, with the complete myriad of opinions that you can find just looking at red pill men. Once again, like going back to what I first experienced after like the first few hours, was that a lot of these guys were married and talking about how their marriage has either improved or how they have a happy marriage, they have children, they have a wife, whatever else. I don't think that this is the monolithic entity that's being painted here, and it shows a lack of preparation almost on Cooper's part, that he can't actually articulate this, or if it's not a lack of preparation, he has looked at something he doesn't like and he's just attached the word red pill to it to define it. I have a feeling it's probably the second one, especially the thumbnail for the video that he put out for this was, I think it had Pearl Davis and Andrew Tate on it. I don't think they're representative of red pill thought, basically.
No, and if I have any bone to pick with the trad consphere, it's this one. They've done a wonderful job, and Prudentialist and I were talking about this when we went over that Department of Homeland Security report a couple of weeks ago, when the department is actually looking towards the manosphere as a radicalization route for domestic terrorism, and they're now putting money into suppressing certain guys' channels. Rollo Tomasi was is mentioned by name in that report and such. And if I'm going to have a bone to pick with these guys, is that they did the regime's job for them, basically, by attaching controversial figures like Andrew Tate as like the face of the red pill and the manosphere movement, when Andrew Tate has only been in, well, I guess you could say, quote unquote, in the space for about 3 to 4 years now. And Rollo Tomasi, he's been in the space since 1999, and so many of these other guys have been for a very long time. So just broadly putting this guy as the face of everything, now the rest of us have to answer for him. It's kind of like whenever, Dickie Spencer like goes on TV, and all the rest of like the people in the right wing space now are associated with this guy. It's the exact same thing.
Right, and you mentioned that these sort of traditional conservative types did the regime's job for them. I don't think they would really see an issue with that. This is the kind of person we're dealing with here. They don't view the regime or the elites that are currently in power or whatever else as the absolute enemy. They just view it as either a hindrance, or they're heavily immoral or whatever else. They don't see the evil that is the current thing that we're under. So like what you just said there, RedHawk, I'm sure would resonate very well with the audience, but I'm sure these people might even take it as a compliment. Good, we're rooting out immorality in some parts of the right. We can make sure young men don't fall into the same traps or whatever else. They'll go back to their refitted second wave feministic Christian livelihoods and marriages now, I suppose. I guess that's their end game.
Yeah, they just think if they suppress the information, then the issues are going to go away. Which is literally what the regime does on every topic, whether it's related to race, whether it's related to the money system, foreign policy. They do this with literally everything. So if you think like you can just suppress, like, the reason that Andrew Tate exists is because people are pissed off and they're sensing that something is wrong. Now, it just so happens that he did a fantastic job of milking the algorithms and using his Hustlers University crowd to basically publish all of his stuff on all of the platforms at once. And he was paying some guys $100,000 a month in order to basically make TikTok account after TikTok account after TikTok account, no matter how many of them got banned, to push his material out there. Now, it worked for him, but at the same time, it's like, okay, if he goes away, it's just going to be somebody else because the problems aren't getting fixed. That's the underlying issue here.
Right, and I think that despite the fact that the traditional conservatives and really any conservative tries to pride themselves on being very pragmatic and realistic and a problem solver and whatever else, they very rarely actually get to the root of a problem to solve it, and I think that's a great irony of their intellectual space. It's why I would never call myself a conservative, really. It's because of this thought process that Cooper is currently exhibiting, but all of them really tend to fall into this trend where they just try to put a bandage over the problem and hope that it fixes it. They don't want to rock the boat too much. Even the supposedly radical conservatives like Feeney and Cooper, due to their Christianity, they think that makes them radical and chic and whatever else. They don't actually want to fix problems. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to be seen as radical. They're very concerned about perception, about respectability, and prestige. That's their main concerns. That it always looks like. So we'll continue once again. Just chime in, and we will pause.
Instead of aiming, young men toward the good, they tend to feed off of young men's anger and push them toward making decisions or having opinions based upon anger, which is just not healthy for them. But
that's just not true.
Yep. Again, ripping on anger here. We mentioned this before, so we don't have to sit on it for too long. But again, it's like, what is wrong with anger, dude? I mean, look around here today. I think men have a lot of reasons to be pretty fucking angry.
Right. They've been, and this is interesting as well, coming from the Lutherans. There's this idea that the secular society is based around fathers, is the root for at least how Lutherans view secular society. I can guarantee you that if you look outside right now, you're not going to see secular society based around fathers. In fact, it seems to be pretty pitted against them. Is that not the cause for righteous anger?
I'd say so, but
Alrighty. So ready to continue, guys?
Yeah.
Cool.
So not healthy for society. So I don't think there's any question that marriage in our society today is not in a good place. And so I think that's just kind of obvious. Since no-fault divorce was legalized, it has become easier and easier for couples to get divorced. Things like the sexual revolution have really impacted the institution of marriage and how people view themselves and view sexuality and view one another and the relationship between male and female and just commitments more generally. I think there are a lot of factors in this.
I'm curious what he thinks the sexual revolution did. I'm very curious because the answer to that would be very revealing.
I was about to say, are we going to take bets that he's going to attack things like the pill, contraception, women legally owning themselves as separate entities from their fathers and husbands? Is he going to attack that?
He might attack the pill, but I don't think he'll attack contraception, contraception, or like female self-ownership. So.
I don't think he'll even attack the pill. What were you going to say, RedHawk?
Yeah, I mean, you see this kind of stuff all the time when people talk about men need to man up here. And I was actually talking about this recently when that god-awful subcontinental Vivek put out a tweet on his Twitter account talking about how if he becomes president, what he wants to do is make it mandatory for men to take a DNA test and such for their children and then put them on the hook for the rest of their lives for it. Now, on the face of that, that sounds great because it's like, oh, okay. He kind of lures her in by saying, we can forcefully institute DNA tests and then forcefully institute men to pay child support and such. Well, the problem with that is that we already have that right now. We already have forced alimony and forced child support from guys, and it financially cripples them. And women just get to, break away with cash and prizes, basically. And that hasn't done anything to fix the problem. What that basically is that's just it's something that sounds good. It's something that we could say, oh, we'll do this. When at the same time, it's like, where is the expectation put on women in any of this kind of stuff? There's over 30 forms of birth control for women, and there's only one for men. So how much more responsibility like, are we allowed to remove from women's shoulders here in this game?
I'm glad that we eventually got to the subject of alimony and basically just indebting men to pay for women. Usually, as we saw in that earlier series of tweets, usually once the woman decides that she's done with the man, this is very interesting. I don't know if it's typically phrased like this, but the only form of debt that someone can be imprisoned for in the modern day is not paying child support, alimony, and whatever else. That's the only debt imprisonment that we still have left.
Yep, can't declare bankruptcy for child support payments. You're not allowed to do it.
So, yeah. Once again, just to echo what RedHawk said, where is the responsibility for women here? I don't think that it's just, oh, no fault divorce was legalized and second wave feminism just destroyed both sexes. There were problems on both sides. I don't think that's why we're seeing the issues here. What happened, I think, and this is a pretty, once again, a stale talking point, because it was so obvious to people even during the time, was that you've liberated women legally. You've basically emancipated them in all ways. But you've kept the responsibilities on men for them as if nothing had happened, which is basically what you're doing is you're just causing a tension that will cause something to snap at some point. You know, it's like if you take a wooden stick and you keep one side stationary and you just move the other side. Eventually, once you get to around a 90-degree angle, the stick's going to break.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the thing that's so absurd about all this is, like, it wasn't the men that abandoned all the traditional institutions of marriage and the traditional, things of courtship or anything like this. It wasn't men that did this. It was women who did this. All right. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we go out and put all the blame on, individual girls or anything like this. Just the same way we don't put the blame on individual men here, because we weren't the ones that instituted into law like the 19th Amendment here, giving women the right to vote. I mean, that was done 4 generations ago. No man today is responsible for that. In the same way that no woman individually is responsible for, first wave feminism kind of deal. But the facts on the ground still stand that the entire red pill community here was basically founded because guys want to fix relationships and guys want to go and pursue women and such like this. Now, this stereotype that the manosphere is just going out there radicalizing people and making them hate women and everything. It's the guys wouldn't be there in the first place if they didn't want to actually have relationships with women and go through all of the work, all of the strife, all of the challenges and stuff that find you in the modern world today. It's the manosphere being extreme, my ass. Every single person on there is telling people, guys, how you could be better, how to look better, how to hit the gym, how to talk to women better, how to be successful in your business, what career you should go under and take. This is such bullshit.
Well, unfortunately, I think it's a rather extreme position now to tell young men to better themselves. I think that's probably something that the regime fears the most. But I do find this... we can rephrase this. We can look at this from a different angle. If we wanted to reinstitute a legally traditional society right now, how many laws would we have to change that affected the responsibilities of women? And compare that to how many laws would we have to change that affected the responsibilities of men? Which one would you have to change more of to get back to this traditional legal system that we had 200 years ago, or however you want to phrase, whatever year you want to pick? How you answer that, and there's an objective correct answer. This isn't up to opinion. However you answer that is going to determine basically just how have things shifted in the modern day. Who is it benefiting? Who has more responsibilities placed onto them, and who has responsibilities taken away from them? I don't think that men are at fault here. In fact, I think they seem to be they seem to be forged into fault, if you will. We have a lot of laws on the books that are not befitting the modern age and seem to be a relic. And you can either make them no longer a relic, you can make them relevant again, or you can do away with them. But you can't keep this current system. So I don't know what Cooper's going to take this. I don't know if he's going to actually go against the things that we think he won't. He might redeem himself somewhat, but let's see. What else does he have to say?
So it's clear that people who are talking about the problems in marriage are really pointing at something that's very important. I mean, I just think of so many men that I know whose, wives left them, and their wives left them not because of some kind of infidelity on the man's part or some kind of abuse on the man's part, but simply because they wanted to leave. They were bored or felt restrained in their marriage, or they wanted to go off and do something else. So I totally understand why men are really angry and angry at the way that men are critiqued in broader society, the way that men are just seen as the problem. And you hear this constant voice from the culture and from our media that's, patriarchy is destroying everything, and that there is this, kind of evil power dynamic that men are the cause of all of the world's problems. And when you see, these young men who are hearing that message over and over and over again, and they're looking around them and saying, look, I'm not treated well. I'm depressed. I'm miserable. And then everybody's blaming me. Just
one would say maybe that causes some anger, one might say, but let's carry on.
Well, yeah, I do find it interesting. He'll say everything but anger there. Once we're taking away this Christian virtue of righteous anger. So yeah, we'll continue. Interesting thing to note there, though.
The fact that I'm a dude for the things that are going on in the world, and how else are they supposed to respond but with anger? So the radical right.
Interesting. We did actually get a admission there that they do respond with anger, and that's how else are they supposed to respond? Let's see if he drops the ball in the end zone.
Yeah, here comes the butt. Yep, here we go.
And I don't even know if I want to call it the right, really. So, but depends the kind of post-Christian right, maybe you would want to say.
No, okay, that's an interesting bit of framing there, because he's characterizing it as post-Christian. I don't think it's because red-pilled manosphere types just decided one day, all right, we're going to ignore the West's Christian history or whatever. I think it might be because the society became post-Christian, and then men realize you can't just pretend that nothing happened and try to live out this Christian ideal anymore. I think that might be more accurate of a framing, but I don't think he would grant them that for some reason.
Yeah, people never ask why there is a post-Christian right. The answer is very enlightening, if they ever answer that question.
Yeah, and then one day, for no reason at all, Christianity left the right.
Yeah.
So let's keep going. Let's see where he takes us.
Is kind of an inevitability, and it was really created by the radical left. I mean, I think that it's just the inevitable result, because if you're constantly criticizing somebody and telling them that they're the problem just because they're a man, and they're not seeing all this supposed privilege that you're constantly telling them that they have, and men just simply are not doing well in our society right now, then of course you're going to have a reactionary, angry movement. What else do you expect to happen?
I actually kind of disagree with his point there. He's trying to put it as if the main impetus for the red pill's existence is men just feel like put upon by woke culture or something. Like, I just go out and people are like, you angry cishet white male, you're the one oppressing me. That's true to a certain degree, but that's not the impetus for the red pill. The impetus for the red pill is that men have biologically determined goals to find mates, and there are structural and societal barriers that prevent that from happening successfully. Right? That's the reason why the red pill exists, right? Just people can call me, mean names, but that's not gonna cause me to go research and engage in like a discourse on blogs just because I feel put upon by society. It has to do with a profound biological desire that is being prevented from being expressed fully.
Well, and look at the timeline he has here. If we go back to RedHawk's point that all these original guys were talking in the 1990s, I don't think that Cooper would be saying, "Oh, we had this radical left takeover in the 90s." For some reason, I think that might screw up his timeline. I think you were going to say something earlier, RedHawk.
Yeah, but my point escaped me now. It'll come back at some point. Carry on.
Yeah. So just say something if the point comes back. We'll keep going.
But right now, I think we're seeing some of the results of that reactionary attitude. And this isn't anything new. Some of this has been around for quite a while, but there's been just a recent blow up. And so one of the
Just real quick here, I don't actually think that the stuff is reactionary. They're not like flip-flopping into the opposite extreme. If anything, I think that's the traditionalist movement. The red pill just seems to be very pragmatic and adaptive by comparison.
Yeah, exactly. And my point just came back to me here. It's like back to like that Camille Paglia quote. It's like, if women were in charge, we would have never moved past grass huts. And it's like, yeah, the whole reason why you have anything in society that gets built, look around in your room right now, anywhere, like the windows, the walls, everything outside, all the cars, everything out there was built by men. And why was it built by men? Because men have this insatiable drive for, sexual conquest, basically. And if we didn't have that, nothing else gets built out there. So yes, you could take away all of you could ban all of the RP stuff, like John was saying there earlier, and men are still going to, come to this conclusion because it's what we're wired for. You can never suppress this enough. It's not possible.
And this is actually a very, at one point, it was a very traditionalist or conservative point to recognize that. This was the entire foundation for J.D. Unwin's Sex and Culture. And it basically was just as if you make everything as polyamorous as possible and as matriarchal as possible, basically you just limit the ability for men to have a certain kind of sexual expression. Not that that's all that they're doing, which would be the I don't want to say patriarchal because that's not what it turns into, but the sort of polygamous, almost Islamic society where you just have to manage a harem of women and that's all you do. This matriarchal and sort of anti-male societal expression just completely destroys productivity. It's the kind of societal organization of Amazonian tribes and African villages. The West, by contrast, had sort of this patriarchal, monogamous system that allowed men to have marriage and to have the sex that it entailed. And this limited but sort of fulfilling form of sexual expression allowed energy from the men in society to be put to productive ends. They got a reward, and they weren't just only going after that sexual end. So things were actually getting done.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And I mean, and that people don't like to talk about this, but there is like a sort of chaotic male sexual energy to high European art. That is what sets it apart, really, from like Byzantine art. Western Catholic art has a wildness to it, a Dionysian sexual energy to it that is distinctly masculine, that the two-dimensional Byzantine art does not have, right? That art, even in most of the Eastern world, does not have. There is something very particular about the Renaissance, the work of the sculptors that you see, even all the way down to the modern era with Bouguereau. Bouguereau is an artist who channels the power of male sexual vitality into high art. And there's something very important there that can't be lost.
Yeah, and back to the discussion a moment ago about like what happens when the society is put under a matriarchy. You kind of have two responses to this. The first one is to have like a hyper like militaristic society like you see in the Islamic world, where because they're fighting wars all the time, you have a large underclass of men that are constantly getting killed, and you need to like replenish the troops all the time because you're constantly at war. And the only way you can really do this is if your guys at the top have harems. Now, what this has resulted in the modern world is the rise in terrorism because they kept on these ancient harem and polyamory cultures, and because the underclass of men aren't being killed in those numbers that they were used to, this gives rise to terrorism and gives rise to people with itchy trigger fingers. I argue this is also where a lot of your quote unquote incel terrorists come from over here. But then on the other side of this as well, what it results in is basically what we're experiencing right now, the competency crisis. And I argue, people talk about this all the time. It's like, is it the technology? Is it the economy? Is it AI? What is it that's causing men to basically check out in the West? And I argue it's largely because of this, like the encroaching longhouse, as we like to call it, the matriarchy. It's like guys just, who are they going to war for these days? Basically, like the average woman in the West is 5'6" and 180 pounds. It's like, really? You want me to go pick up like my gun and go fight for that? Really? You know, so a lot of guys are just going to check out and watch pornography.
And this is something else about that sex and culture book. If we're talking about matriarchal societies, the one thing that kept them going in at least population terms, because as you allude to, RedHawk, you get this sort of competence issue. Men don't get any actual reward for being productive. There's no incentive attached to it, and there's certainly no spiritual element attached to it either. How do these civilizations keep going in their primitive forms? Typically, they would have a fertility cult. And this is where you get those Amazonian and African idols to like fat women and whatever else that have multiple faces, multiple breasts, and whatever else, that they're the representation for fertility. That's what keeps the population going, was this idolistic and religious drive to just continue reproducing. We don't actually have that in the modern day. We don't really have the fertility cult. If anything, we have the opposite. This is we've combined the matriarchal system, which naturally limits fertility, the production of families, and just production in general, and we've combined it with sort of an antinatalism. I don't think the solution here is just to subsidize people having as much children as possible. I think the solution might just be to not have the matriarchal system.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, this is like the classic talking point, like in conservative circles, they had a response to this. It's like, oh, if we just give people child tax credits, that'll make them have kids more. It's like, no, it's because the man doesn't have any authority in his household, and you guys are helping along with this system that continuously strips his authority away.
Yeah, I mean the husband, every woman's husband is the state now. But yeah, let's keep playing.
Yeah. So all right, we'll keep going.
Solutions to the problems that are being faced in terms of marriage right now are just to say that, well, men shouldn't get married. So marriage is something that just, basically as a man, you're going to be in a position where you're giving everything to this woman, and she will likely just leave you, and then your life is going to be a mess, and you're going to be miserable. So you might as well just avoid getting married altogether.
Okay,
now, that is no solution.
All right, so right there, I mean, yeah, that's the thought process with a lot of dudes. And as far as I'm concerned, that's pretty much justified in most cases at this point. So let's hear what this guy actually has to respond to that basically like 100% true claim. I mean, like, what is the point of marriage at this point, particularly if you're a secular person? Like, why would you ever get married? You know, you basically get you can get all the advantages that marriage provides you in a secular form just by like having a long-term relationship or something like that. You know, like what's the point here? So like, obviously from the Christian perspective, that's different, but you know, like, you really aren't offered much in marriage anymore here, aside from, you know, the Christian perspective, which is why I think like Christian guys are most susceptible to being taken advantage of in this.
Yeah, I mean, even if you are Christian, like, why do you have to have your marriage legitimized by the state? Why can't you just have a covenantal marriage?
Before we get into the discussions over like the legal forms of marriage, and we'll get into this at the end of this video, don't worry. Even Christians have a much less of an incentive or a reason to get married now. Sure, there's the moral reason that you can actually have sex without being in sin. But the full form of that we saw at the very least during the Reformation, before the Reformation, and for a couple hundred years afterwards, no longer exists. If we take the conclusion that the wife's body is owned by the husband and the husband's by the wife, to its conclusion in regards to sexual desires and whatever else, most churches would kick you out. They wouldn't scarcely see you as Christian, let alone human. So we've already weakened that form as well. So even in a Christian sense, the incentive to marry has been very much watered down. So yeah, we'll see how he answers this very real concern.
Okay, the breakdown of marriage is the root of all of the problems that we're seeing in this area in the first place. And all of this really goes back to the sexual revolution, this idea that sex can just be divorced from the natural consequences of sex, which is having children, and can be divorced from the marital context, and that sex has now just become some kind of free consenting action between adults that is pleasurable. And
I kind of disagree with this framing a little bit, but this is just kind of on semantics. I mean, even in Christian societies in medieval Europe, I think it was either Augustine or Aquinas, I forget which one, but those guys are even talking about how prostitution is something acceptable to have in your society. I don't
Aquinas
necessarily
has an entire like diatribe about how like prostitution should be legal. Also, during the Middle Ages all the way into the Renaissance, there was concubinage in a lot of Europe.
Yeah, this is why like I don't know quite how to put this into words properly, but it feels like you're trying to pull like a fast one on me here, when like in Christian societies in the past, they even still had to acknowledge like, well, yeah, I mean, like men have needs, obviously. I mean, like we have to have this out here, like I don't really even think in any society in human history, like people had the view of sex like he's describing right here. I don't think that's the case.
Well, I don't quite understand. It seems to be a non sequitur so far. So the thing he's trying to dispute is that these red pill manosphere types are saying that you shouldn't get married and that's bad. Why is it bad? Well, because the dissolution of marriage is part of the problem, because the sexual revolution and whatever else. I don't actually think he's made the case so far. He hasn't addressed the concerns that people have about marriage. He's just saying you should get married because marriage is good, because things were better when we had more marriage, and whenever we stopped having marriage in the way that that we once had it, things went bad. Well, you haven't actually addressed the concerns that people have about getting married right now. You've drawn trend lines basically and said when we had more of X, things were gooder. Woo.
Yeah, I mean, like this kind of it's easy to like throw like shade at the sexual revolution, right? It's like it's this topic, everybody knows about it, it occurred at a certain time, a lot of other like societal changes were occurring at the exact same time, so it's kind of like one of those watershed moments where you can immediately like attach everything to as like, oh, this is bad. I mean, I kind of argue the biggest issue facing like marriage and the relationships between men and women today is technology. And I think that's had a far greater effect than some like feminists gathered together and decide to have a new ideology come out. And I argue, like, I don't think people had this view of sex that people are claiming was just overdone like during the sexual revolution. I don't think that's the case. I mean, I think people were far more looser in times past than most people would give them credit for. I know our friend AA likes to bring up all the time the Shakespearean play Measure for Measure, where they try to outlaw all sex within Venice, and of course it fails, and like it fails.
Well, and this is a strange idea as well, as if even these older societies, like every time they had sex, a child was produced, which is not how even biologically it works even now. Like
no, and also like I think people were pretty smart enough to figure out, thousands of years ago that, hey, if I stick this in there and ejaculate, a baby's going to come out. I think people were pretty smart enough to realize that, hey, sex is pretty pleasurable, and we're going to go around ways to ensure that we don't have pregnancy the whole time. I mean, look in the ancient Roman days, there was a plant, psyllium, that used to grow on the North Africa, and the Romans harvested it to extinction. They used it as a birth control plant.
Right, but even outside of these contraceptive measures, these external contraceptive measures, basically one of the first things that man did that was scientific was like measure cycles, calendars, astronomy, and whatever else. Was man measuring all of these different cycles. It's one of the most ancient sciences possible. You do literally the same thing with women, and then suddenly you've magically decoupled childbirth from the bearing of children from sex.
Yeah, that's I don't the trad like cope of I'm not using birth control even though I like do NFP so effectively that I'm never going to get my wife pregnant is such a cope. It's like it's very dishonest.
Right. It seems to me that these traditionalists would be much more honest if they just said that people saw children as a blessing and not necessarily that people didn't have contraception. I think the first one is much more true than the second.
Absolutely. And this whole concept about sex being reserved just for the making of children within the bounds of a marriage, this kind of also is used in a subversive way to kind of I guess for lack of a better word, shame the male sexual drive, and this idea that like, oh, sex is just for like making babies and such. It's like, okay, so that basically amounts to what? You have sex like 3 times or 4 times to get your wife pregnant, and then you're not having it at all for the rest of the year. I know that that's like not actually what, is the expectation of like, traditional Christians, like in the bonds of a marriage. It's like, yeah, you're supposed to have sex with your husband, right? But this just seems like it's used as a way to, like shame male sexuality, kind of,
Well, quite clearly, as we've discussed, the driving principle behind all of this is that men are at fault somehow, magically, and it's not just men as some ethereal collective. It's every individual man. That's why their prescription is to just man up, each and every individual one of you. Just be better, and then the problems will go away. Like I'm sure some would, but I doubt the underlying issue is actually going to be solved. So yeah, this whole thing about the sexual revolution magically introducing contraception, and that's where everything went wrong. I don't think that's actually what it is. I think that what we actually had was especially among the northern and western European populations, I think what you see is a mentality shift that children are a burden, children are a curse. They're messy and evil and terrorists and whatever else, and they aren't desirable anymore.
Yeah,
I think that's
this
the
is why
issue.
this is why I think shows like Sex and the City have done more damage than birth control pills have.
Sure, and this isn't to completely exonerate birth control pills either, because as we are mentioning all these different kinds of methods of avoiding pregnancy that have existed throughout history, some are less harmful to your body and your mental state of being than others. I don't think that the main issue with the birth control pill is really that it's decoupling childbearing from sex and marriage. I think that it's quite obvious the main problem is that it screws with the female psychology to such a point that it's ubiquitous now.
Yeah, that's my major objection with it. I mean, like I mentioned before, like we've had forms of birth control since ancient times, and they haven't had this big of an impact on society. And yeah, it absolutely is true. Like the stereotype of women on birth control versus off of it. Yeah, it definitely fucks with your brain chemistry to a huge degree. So that, as far as I'm concerned, that's the way that you should be attacking it. Not saying like, oh, like all contraception is bad kind of deal. I mean, like we had condoms since like men could write, basically.
So yeah, I think the things that should be attacked here by conservatives then are the mentality and the health effects of a lot of the things from the sexual revolution. It's a very weak argument put forward, even by generally strong people. Like this isn't just Cooper here. This is a lot of pretty respected conservatives will make this argument, and I don't think it holds up. So we'll keep going, and once again, no matter how far we get through it, just say something and we'll pause.
Is the root of a lot of the issues with marriage, if not most of the issues with marriage, and most of the issues with the way that people are viewing marriage in our society. So what the red pillars are doing right now and trying to argue against marriage is going back to the thing that messed the whole thing up in the first place, which is the sexual revolution. And this is why when you look at the red pill types, what they're doing is they're looking at women solely by the questions of, how attractive are they at what age, and who's more attractive than who, and what's a high value man. And
so this is as opposed to the traditional marriage method where the parents would do exactly this for their sons and their daughters.
How old were women when they got married prior to the 1900s, Jordan?
And not only how old were they, but like, was that a criterion for all these arranged marriages?
Yes,
I don't know, maybe.
I mean, yeah, that was actually a very common thing back then, and that was considered. That's why they were called old maids.
Right. Yeah. It was old maids and then maidens as well. This idea that you would have the young virgins were the desirable women to be married off to these families of high stature. So this is a very modern critique that he's giving off here. We're just supposed to ignore how marriage and mate selection worked in the West forever, I guess.
Yeah. Now I will throw this guy a bone here, though, on the talking about like high value man and stuff. Like most everybody who's talking about these topics are just autists and a bunch of spurgs looking for clicks. Basically, it is like really, really cringe. A lot of the discussion that goes on around these topics, even though like they are rooted in something serious. But I will tend to agree, like I said at the start here, I mean, basically at this point, 95% of what gets classified as like red pill and such is just complete cringe and garbage at this point, and people trying to make a quick buck because there is a huge market for it, but let's continue.
Right, and just before we do continue, these concerns that someone might be looking for in a woman, if you're a young man, is she young, is she attractive? These aren't just like incidental concerns that don't influence anything. You know, youth is a direct effect. It has a direct correlation and causation to the healthy bearing of children.
Yeah, like if she's like has weird hormonal imbalances from years of taking birth control, you're gonna see it.
Right, and then the other thing as well is attractiveness. As if before the sexual revolution, men did not select their wives based on attractiveness, or their parents didn't look for arranged wives on the basis of their physical appearance. It's as if, once again, physical appearance is also directly correlated to one's ability to healthily produce offspring. This is basically what this is. This is just the conservatives have so internalized their hatred for anything that sounds eugenic so that they must oppose it now. These things that we're discussing here, age, attractiveness, and whatever else he's about to throw out, these are all eugenic concerns. It's not being handed down from like some government agency or some scientist or whatever. These are just natural responses. It's how it's how societies like actually develop over time, is they select these people that are best fit, supposedly. So I don't see why these are such major concerns. If it was all that you were looking for, I would say that's misguided. But you know, we've had paradigms before where you could just only look for these things and society generally turned out fine. You know, if you're concerned about women being objectified or whatever else, I mean, they were literally sold off by their fathers at one point in Western history to get them out of the house. I mean, at that point, they're being commodified as well. God forbid.
Here's the other thing too. There's not a woman on planet Earth that doesn't like being objectified, no matter what the fuck they say.
Yeah. So yeah, somehow as well, all of these people that just continually objectify women continue reproducing. And
yeah, who would have thought?
It's crazy, bro. Wow.
You would think if this was such a terrible thing, it would be weeded out by now. Even if the objective is that it's immoral, even immoral vices are generally weeded out as well. Every person is predisposed to them, so they come back. But you know, no one is just immensely attracted to someone who embodies the vice of sloth. You know, no one loves someone who's just so perfectly lazy, or someone who's so perfectly prideful. You know, these things are deterrents. Somehow, these people that objectify women, the supposed eighth vice from Satan, somehow these people not only reproduce, but it's something actively sought after. I don't know how this could possibly be.
Well, I mean, there's a whole $1 trillion industry every single year that basically makes women objectify themselves. You know, and I mean, like, if you don't like that word, then use any other word, like, you know, the beauty or, you know, attractiveness or whatever. Like, women know that they know what they're doing and they like it. I mean, and honestly, who doesn't? Like, everyone likes to feel appreciated and likes everybody else to look at them and make them feel good. I mean, you know, guys get it far less, you know, but like, which is what makes it stand out so much. You know, it's like if a guy gets a compliment, it sticks with him literally for the rest of his life.
I was about to mention that. This reminds me of those comics that went around like a few years ago. I don't actually know how old they are, where it was, what if the roles were reversed and all these women were complimenting men just willy-nilly and, you know, saying how wonderful they were, how intelligent they were, telling them they looked nice and whatever else. And I don't remember if it was originally satirical, these comics, or if they were like someone with just completely no self-awareness at all. But everyone just reacted to this, and it was mostly men just saying, yeah, it would be nice if we were... you know, if we got this sort of constant appreciation like women get. It's a funny sort of reversal, and I understand that there's probably most people would bristle against that. I just found that it stuck with me for a while. I've found it interesting. So we'll continue.
It's a funny joke.
You know, it really has to do largely with how many women he can get, and so this red pill movement is really moving away from commitment in a marital relationship towards men just, I guess, try to get whatever woman they want, but won't make a commitment because women are doing all these terrible things to men.
I mean,
Red
it
Hawk,
can
is
be.
that true?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly can be, but it also certainly cannot be. Again, this goes back to it's not an ideology, it's a praxeology. And I'm seeing some guy in the chat here throwing shade at things as well. It's like many of the manosphere dudes are Jews and blacks, and it's literally just made to alienate white people. It's like, okay, well, how about you just don't be retarded then? It's like, okay, it's not that difficult. Yeah, go use the tactics and actually have some semblance of your own frame in your life here. It's like take responsibility. I know that term is like really cringe and shit like this, but it's like, yeah, like pull yourself up here, form your own frame, figure out what you want out of your life, and take the information that's useful for you and use it, and discard the stuff that isn't useful for you. This is like basic 101 kind of stuff here about being a man and being an adult.
I mean, it's basic 101 stuff here about like gaining knowledge. You can't just pick up any book and expect to be enlightened by it. You actually have to filter what you read and what you take away and what you incorporate into your life. That's a basic human response. In fact, that is a basic living response, is the ability to adapt to your environment as you gain new information. But once again, the thing I'd like to highlight here is this isn't some monolithic ideology that's being put forward, as you keep saying, RedHawk. This idea that the red pill movement prescribes for young men X, Y, and Z is absurd, and it's absurd if you spend more than like 2 hours looking at this stuff, or if you go
that's
beyond
the thing. It's so easy. It's so easily disprovable, which is what gets us all the time. It's like guys do zero research when attacking this space. It's just a caricature that they're attacking every time. It's really amazing when you think about it, how little work people do to critique this space.
Right, and sincerely, I would be interested to see if some people have like a real dispute as to factual reality here. Like, is the red pill wrong about something actually happening in this way or not? I would be interested in reading it. I don't know if I'd agree or not, but like I've never come across it yet. Like this, there's never been like a fully coherent and formulated intellectual response that I've seen against the manosphere of the red pill praxeology. It's always caricatures, or it's always treating it as a monolith, which is I don't know. I mean, I'd be interested in to see what the other side would even be, but so far it's just pathetic.
So. Yeah. Okay, well here we got another criticism in the chat here. It's like, well, now the problem is the lexicon and the new code and stuff. It's like, dude, like
here. I'll put it up on screen and just what's the issue here?
Yeah, it's like, okay, like what kind of response is this? It's like, okay, so there's internet language now. Okay, who cares? Move on. Words change. Words have different meanings in different ages. Like there's new slang and new terms that come up with. Who cares? Like, is this a legitimate concern?
Right, and there's the issue here is that it's alienating people. We're coming up with new words and all this other stuff, and it might be worth analyzing. Why do new words come into existence? And there's a variety of reasons for why. In political and social contexts, you usually come up with a new word because the old words that you were using to mean the same thing have shifted in their meaning.
It's also just not true. Like, red pill language is now the default, and it's not alienating people. It's just controlling the language. I mean, the Zoomer generation uses a red pill language, even if they do it kind of ironically, like Sigma and Riz. They're using that kind of language because it's had such an influence on the culture. So it's not like you're like alienating people. You're actually controlling the language, which is a good thing.
Right, and look at the comments as well. I've heard more people say simp than the alternative put forward here, just at least among Zoomers.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess we're having a back and forth with this guy here in the chat
too.
But okay. He's like, the problem is using internet slang in real life. No, that's called not being retarded. Again, like you using internet slang is falling for Jewish tricks. It's like, how about you just don't be a spurg and bring up like internet terms in real life when you're talking to normies? This isn't hard, people. Not everyone's in your echo chamber, dude. It's like, I don't want everyone in my echo chamber. I don't want to go out and be like some kind of red pill evangelist here. Like, people will look at me like I got 3 heads or I'm speaking Chinese. It's like, the information is there for people who want it. Why would I go out there and start talking about this in a random party? It's dumb. Like, hide your power level. This should be basic, like 101 stuff for people.
Here, we'll reel it in because I think the point has been made. But I don't think that the main problem with anything put forward by the manosphere, the red pill types, is that they're using new lingo or something else. I think that's probably a natural development most people on the right, on the actual right, will call themselves a paleoconservative. That is a neologism. You did not used to have to differentiate that you're the older kind of conservative, because that used to be all there was. Something changed in the environment that caused these changes in words to spring forth. So we'll continue here with Cooper, though.
And that's no solution to anything at all, and that is exactly what is destroying society and what will destroy society. So here's the reality here. Marriage is the most fundamental, foundational institution of culture. In fact, all society and all of culture flows out of the reality of marriage.
Lost Ryan here.
And so if
did we lose me?
Oh no, it might have been me, or it might have been you. I don't know.
Alrighty.
We carry on. You're back.
We'll let him finish out this point, and once again, say something if you want to pause.
you get rid of marriage or you destroy marriage, it's going to have profound implications for every other institution of society, right? If it's the foundational institution, you destroy the foundational institution, that all of a sudden starts to have ramifications in all of these other areas. And that can just be seen also in just studies of children who are raised with, one parent, or children who are raised with, someone who's has multiple partners, or versus someone who was raised in a home with a present mother and a present father. The one who has a present mother and present father that are married is going to have statistically the best outcomes, because there is something natural about this. It is best for society. So if children are raised best in that household, then that has ramifications for what that child does with their life. You see this with...
So to be fair, I think I've seen people, red-pilled types, especially the married Christian ones, actually admit this and incorporate that into their analysis about wider society. Like, I don't think this is a new ground that is being tread here for at least that group. But that's the one I'm most familiar with. Like, RedHawk, is this some new thing that the red pill and manosphere types have not considered? The idea that marriage is this fundamental institution to society. Still there?
Hold on. I lagged out a little bit there for a second, but to answer your question, Ryan, no, like everyone acknowledges like marriage is important, to the foundations of society. And I guess the reason also why like the RP space has a huge overlap into like right-wing circles and such, is because like, I don't think you'd ever find like a guy on like the RP side of things who isn't at least like a very like basic bitch normie conservative. I think you'd be really hard pressed to like find like a Democrat or something like that in the red pill spaces. It just doesn't overlap very well. So like, yeah, they acknowledge marriage is important. They also acknowledge that marriage is the foundation of societies. I don't think this is anything new here. The problem that they're raising here is that there's some serious issues here, and you can basically get everything out of marriage by just having a long-term relationship than what you can normally get through, the institutions of the past. And again, like I was mentioning before, there's like Christian guys who would take a different angle on that as well. But I don't think anybody in the space acknowledges that like marriage isn't important. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about it.
I was about to say, being as that's like the main cause for existing, is the institution of marriage just falling apart or distorting, if you will. I don't think if it fell apart, I think that might actually have been better for a lot of the people that became seminal figures in the red pill and manosphere crowd, because at least then they wouldn't have had the delusion that it was a working system. The distortion of marriage, I think, is the cause for existence for this group. It's a very strange point for Cooper to bring this up as if he's educating them here, as if he's saying something radically new. So I suppose we'll continue. I found that very strange. It's as if he hasn't thought through why they exist in the first place. So we'll continue.
Poverty statistics. The most clear indicator that somebody is going to be in poverty is that they are not married and have children out of wedlock and don't get married. This is just a reality that we're seeing in our society. And yes, you can talk about kind of what causes what, and there's plenty to talk about there. But the point is that even just looking at pure statistics themselves and the psychological outcomes for children, it's clear that what is going to be the best thing for society and for future generations is not to get rid of marriage because women are bad, but instead
Okay, but who is arguing for just getting rid of marriage in the way that he means it? I don't think he means just the legal contract. Something tells me he thinks that marriage is just, the monogamous and lifelong commitment of a wife and husband together. Does anyone argue that it should be done away with, besides like communists?
No, and the other thing too here is like his argument is like, oh, because women are bad. It's like, no, otherwise then the space wouldn't exist here. And this is why I have like, I just joke about MGTOWs all the time because I don't think it's a legitimate or real movement when they just say like, oh, we're gonna, go our own way and be devoid of all women in life. And it's like, well, at the end of the day, like women are pretty much like the best thing on the planet at the end of the day. I mean, like we talk about them and we complain about them and yeah, they've got their own issues and things like this. But again, like you have the entire RP space that is basically like dedicated to helping guys fix their problems and with women. Like nobody there is actually saying like, oh, like women are bad. It's like, oh, we have certain problems that the institution of marriage is a bad deal for men right now. But it's not like people are saying, oh, women are terrible, therefore you should never have any interactions with them. There are some like goofballs that do that kind of stuff, but that's not the majority of people.
I think that you would be looked at as pretty stupid if you just showed up into one of these forums and with the opinion that women are bad. Because that's the other thing that this seems to be based around, is how to make things work with women. Why would you want to understand that or use it or anything else if you fundamentally believe that women are bad? Like this is a poor caricature, I think. So we'll keep going unless you guys want to. John, did you want to say something?
No.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, we'll keep going.
To strengthen marriage, to have marriage once again be this foundational institution and be seen as and accepted as this foundational institution through which all other institutions come.
Okay, let's play a game here. How is he going to propose to fix this, if he even does at all? Is he going to say we should go back to the legal system that allowed traditional marriage to function, like women being owned by their husbands or their fathers, a coverture law? Is he going to suggest that this ideal of having as little children as possible, or an ideal amount of children, is going to be askewed? Is he going to advocate that? Or is he going to come up with some other reason? What do you guys on the panel think?
I think he's going to say man up and marry him, Chud. I think that's what he's going to say. Man up and marry him.
I think he's going to do what all the establishment conservatives of all stripes tend to do, no matter what the topic is. Let's just go back to this previously established left-wing stance on things that was just, radical, not only like 30 years ago, but we need to go back to that thing, so he's not going to propose anything that's actually radical. He's just going to say the leftism of 30 years ago. Let's find out.
Okay. Yeah. See, he could blow past all of our expectations. Let's see what he has to say.
How do we encourage young men is really the question then that this gets to, because there is a significant real problem that's happening right now. And I see this just in being involved in campus ministry, working with both young Christian men and young Christian women, is that on both sides, there are significant difficulties in finding a spouse. There's a fear that, they'll never get married. And on the side of the men, consistently see that they feel like it's hard for them to find a woman who aligns with their values, because women do tend leftward, and this is going to be a really significant this is going to have a really significant effect on culture. That right now what we're seeing is young men are becoming more conservative and young women are becoming more liberal. This is just going to be a huge issue, because if you have completely different values.
Is it really though? Like,
no. Yeah, we discussed this earlier. Female opinions are a non-issue.
There's two things here. Why are women suddenly just trending more leftward? What could have possibly caused this? I mean, just reading back in history, that doesn't seem to be just something that happens. And then the second thing, that's a lot of fluff. We still haven't heard how this traditional system of marriage is coming back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like, you guys really need to get this through your head. Like, for lack of a better word, your woman's opinions do not matter. And just, pat her on the head and send her on the way. That doesn't mean like you walk around saying, oh, you're stupid, bitch. Don't talk about these kinds of things. You can just you can play along with things, like be teasing. If you guys follow my Twitter account, when a woman comes into my comments, I'm always being respectful and teasing her the entire time, just not acknowledging her points in any, validity. It's like, I'm listening, but I'm not acknowledging.
That's nice, sweetheart. That's nice.
Exactly.
Now go make me some supper. All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's say if he actually answers the question, is he going to give us this good roadmap or this reason why we can bring back traditional forms of marriage? Let's see.
Relationship is probably not going to work out very well. So I see this with young men, that they simply can't find women who really share their values or who will give them honor or respect. But then on the other hand, I speak often with young women, Christian college age women, who say
Here we
that
go.
they really want to get married. They desperately want to get married. Some of them, that's their highest goal in life, is to get married.
But do they want to be wives?
Yeah, I was about to ask, if their highest goal in life is to get married, why are they in college? That seems to signify. That seems to signify, like, their actions don't seem to signify that they actually really want as their highest goal to get married. Their actions seem to signify that they want something else along with it, or perhaps over it.
Stated preference versus revealed preference.
So,
Yeah.
But so for some reason, I'm getting the feeling that we're just going to nuance the issue to death and not actually get a reason as to why marriage in its traditional form fell apart or how to bring it back. I feel like we're just going to get nuanced to death here. Let's see if he gives us something tangible.
We cannot find a man who is not addicted to porn. That is a reality also that we have to
How do
face.
they know that? Like, how do women?
Who are you asking? Like,
Yeah.
are you going up to like men on the first date and being like, "Are you a porn addict?" And who's telling you honestly, yes?
Also,
or are you just like inferring it?
Right, and this is the other thing as well. Really, every single one, you cannot find a single one that isn't. Or is it that you could find some that were, but they also had faults that you didn't like? I for some reason, I feel like the second is statistically more probable than the first, and logically as well. I have a feeling I know quite a few people that don't have this vice, but have other ones. So, it seems to me here they just want someone perfect.
Well, yeah, there's certainly that. Back when I was talking about earlier how Christian chicks will tend to always compare you to Jesus, and it's like, well, I'm not the son of God. I'm not perfect here. All right, but I also like I don't want to shift this conversation too much into the porn discussion. People can look at a discussion I had with Anglo Ortho about maybe like a year and a half ago at this point on his channel. We discussed the porn issue. Actually went on Mr. Patriarch's channel a couple months back. We discussed this topic more in detail as well. But like, there's like this boogeyman of pornography that's thrown out there as if it's and what often it comes in parcel with this conversation is, like I was talking about earlier, a shaming of the male sexuality here, in the sense of like, well, men actually like don't really need sex kind of deal. Well, it's like, well, all the evidence kind of points to the contrary on that point here, as to why like pornography usage is so ubiquitous throughout the West here. It kind of speaks to the fact that, yeah, men actually do need this itch scratched. And in times past, we were talking about this as well, that, yeah, there were prostitutes and courtesans around, and they were actually allowed in Christian societies before. Like, people had a more healthy understanding of how men like would actually behave here. And it seems to me like if you're going to attack issues with porn, I think the thing that you should attack it with is the fact that it's exposed to kids at a really young age. You should attack the fact that it incentivizes guys to be, like lazy and not actually go out in the pursuit of women. But the reason that you shouldn't be attacking porn is because guys need like, their seed released. They need this itch scratched, like that's my angle with it here. And I so often see that like the angle people always take is, well, men have these urges and these urges are bad. And it's like, well, the solution should be your wife should just be having sex with you a bunch. That's what the solution should be.
Yeah, as we'll see with these spicy readings that we've been saving for the end of the stream, like even especially Protestant Christians will recognize that the urge itself, the nature that men want to have sex, is not the full evil thing here. And in fact, it's not really that evil. You have marriage for that. What is the evil thing here? Mm-hmm. Is just the one might even say that you shouldn't be telling, if you want to fix this issue of pornography, it's not that men should man up and then just be completely impervious to any sort of temptation, as if that's a realistic expectation that will solve the problem. One might even be able to say at this point that perhaps we should have better parents. Perhaps it's the parenting field that has gone awry here. You know, maybe the reason that children are being exposed to these things at the age of like 8 to 12 isn't because the especially the men are just these uniquely evil creatures, as if women are somehow superior to them by virtue of being female. Perhaps the issue is because they didn't have, you know, a proper home or proper parents, proper oversight, if you will. Maybe they had oversight in the wrong places and then no oversight in the places that they should have had it. Maybe that's where you should be looking here.
Exactly. And like, this is what I was getting at, you know, as well here is like why would you ever like shame a man for, you know, wanting to have sex? Like, in what why? How is that helpful in any way, shape, or form? You know, like, oh, you want to have sex. That's bad. You shouldn't be thinking that way. It's like, no, you should go out and be successful. And then, yeah, like from a Christian perspective, yeah, you should go have a wife and then go have as much sex as you possibly want. You know, like this is my issue with it. And it also is used as a rearguard action when, you know, guys find themselves in sexless marriages kind of deal. It's like, well, you shouldn't be feeling this way. You should just be happy with your wife, you know, because like you know, she's your wife basically. And, you know, women don't have this expectation to have sex with their husbands because that's a ridiculous expectation for men to have. You know, that's degenerate. That's horrible. You know, like they should suppress this kind of stuff. And I'm like, I don't know about that. That seems a little ridiculous to me.
I mean, since we're dealing with a Lutheran here articulating these things, now I don't think he has exactly made this claim necessarily that the urge to have sex is itself the ultimate evil here with men. But definitely certain Lutherans do go against this. So to address them in particular, there's this whole section in the Lutheran confessions on priests marrying. And in it, in the confession, there's this wonderful statement that basically just says that the only men that should not marry are the ones that don't have natural sexual desires. And the amount of people that applies to is minuscule to basically be irrelevant for the vast majority of people. So when you're looking at the institution of marriage, it is to accommodate this thing. It is not to make sure that it goes extinct within the man. It is not to, you don't have some other institution or way to make sure that men just no longer feel sexual desire. You have the institution of marriage that accommodates for this from God. That would be the Lutheran explanation for this. And it seems that the vast majority of the Lutherans either only vocally say that they agree with it and then go off and do something else, or they just explicitly disagree with it, especially the women. It's an absolute inversion of what marriage is even supposed to be, at least from the Christian perspective, this idea that sex is wrong and bad. And ironically, you typically hear this as like Protestants trying to act superior towards Roman Catholics. There's like a sort of a ivory tower bookish Protestant idea that haha, the stupid Roman Catholics and the Eastern Orthodox have this negative view of sex and that makes us superior. But in practice, the Protestants aren't much better because they act it out anyways. They act out this negative idea just from a more feministic perspective.
Well, the other
like
thing
Roman
too,
Catholicism had like institutions that safeguarded against that for most of its history. It wasn't. This was always understood to be the norm. Like most people were expected to get married, and the ones who weren't, like there were these sort of pressure release valves built into the system.
Yeah, exactly.
and you know, Ryan, you were mentioning there about how like the Protestants can often use this as like a cudgel to beat like the more Roman Catholics and Orthodox with, but this is also something that just secular people or the left will use to cudgel against Christianity as a whole. It's like,
good point.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you guys like, you know, are just expecting people like to be fuddy-duddies and not have sex and such. And, you know, at the end of the day, this is like the main driver for men throughout all of history. You guys can argue that like it should be God and such, and you know, like you should be in service to God. But I mean, throughout the vast majority of human history, like the main motivation for men is sex, you know, and to get access to it, you know. And so you're just turning people off with this, you know, weird like expectation here. It's just like Christians just talk about sex in such a weird way. It's always been bizarre to me. You know, like, and it's no wonder that like married Christian men have some of the highest usages of pornography rates and usage. You know, it's like, what do you expect is going to happen?
Right, and it should be it should indicate a problem that a problem exists whenever I have to go back like 200 to 500 years to read Christians speaking about sex normally, like as if it is not just some vile evil, either from a theological standpoint or from a feministic standpoint. Like just to escape that, you have to go back. How many generations is 200 years ago?
Well, also like I guess like the thought process would be is like if we talk about sex in a certain way, then we can like I don't know, save more relationships or marriages or stuff from like falling apart because we're not getting into like the I don't know the nuts and bolts of the matter, so to speak, or something. I guess that would be the argument. But really what this actually ends up happening, and in my experience, this causes severe problems when like you get with a Christian girl in a relationship and she's had like 20 years basically being told that like sex is really awful, it's degenerate, it's bad, it's shameful, yeah, you shouldn't be comfortable with it. And then like the guy basically has been waiting his entire life, like, is like a horse, like at a race, like just trotting, like ready to go. He's so excited. And then you finally get to the marriage and you just hope the sex opens up like a valve on your like faucet or something in your kitchen. And it causes severe problems. Like it's like you're expected to have sex all the time now. It's like we had the kiss on the altar. It's like, I don't know. It tends to cause way more problems when people aren't honest about it.
Yeah, so we'll keep going. We'll see if we still haven't gotten to Cooper solving the problem. We've just gotten a little bit of a, dare I say, obfuscation. So here we go.
And you don't just get to blame the women, because that's a huge problem. And you don't get to say, well, too bad, that's not a big deal, you got to be with the guy anyway, and just deal with the fact that he's just constantly looking at other women.
That's always going to happen.
So there are
yeah. This is a very strange thing. Is that is the ground for divorce now that the husband looked at another woman?
This is so ludicrous. It's like, again, let's just be real here. It's like, and you even had stories talking about this in the Bible as well, and this just bears out in the facts of the matter. It bears out in the real world and everything like this. It's like a man can absolutely have eyes for other women and still love his wife absolutely the same. Like, guys, it's literally how we're programmed. We can't turn it off. We can, funny enough, I was actually having a discussion with this. I was at the beach because I was down in Florida a couple of weeks ago, and I was with a couple of friends of mine, and we were just like casually making some jokes when we were at the beach. And me and my friends are sitting there and watching some two really cute blondes walking across the beach and everything. And one of the girlfriends that was with us was kind of like making fun of us and such, because we were making jokes as guys tend to do. And we kind of just like flat out went and said, she's like, well, you could turn it off, I said, sweetheart, it is impossible for us to turn it off. We could put it on mute, but like when you mute your phone kind of deal, but like the vibrations on the phone are still going to go off. There's no 100% turning this thing off. It's impossible. Just accept it, live with it. It's not that big of a deal.
And so this is interesting as well from a Christian perspective, because you have the teaching from Christ where he says that if you look at a woman with lust, then you've committed adultery in your own heart. But that has never been the standard, especially in Christian history, for either nullifying a marriage or divorcing or something like that. It's always the actual act itself of adultery that is the standard, and not just the sin in all of its forms.
Well, yeah, John was talking about art earlier. It's like there's plenty of Renaissance art with naked women on it. Is that lustful?
Oh, it's not just
plenty of medieval art.
It's not just naked women. It's like depiction. There's clearly a sexual undertone. There's like depictions of rape in in Renaissance sculpture. There's a definite like extremely energetic eroticism. It's not to the point where people called it pagan at the time and still do.
Right, but and I would just like to reemphasize this point, because we'll be revisiting it briefly once we get through this Jordan Cooper video. Is that the standard for actually considering a marriage is always the act itself, not whether the man has committed adultery in his heart ever before. Because if that's your standard, you're not going to get married.
Oh, did we lose him?
Yeah, I think we might have.
Well, anyway, I think his point was we don't allow divorce for adultery in your heart the same reason we don't execute people for committing murder in their heart.
Yeah.
Because society would just collapse.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, without our video playing here, what other points have come to your mind on this one, John? You've been a little bit more quiet of the three of us this stream.
Well, yeah, I'm not a like, I don't have WRIZ, so I'm not like, I don't have the expertise here to come and lecture on how to have WRIZ.
I never, like I know that the Riz term is more popular with the Zoomers, than
it is.
Definitely is like I'm like on the millennial side of things, like I am, so even I'm not up with the lingo like with the kids these days and such. Like I've never once opened TikTok, never watched a
I haven't either. It's just a thing people say now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's, you just have to be very clear-pilled about all these things. You can be, you have to go through the period of anger, and then you just come to accept things as they are, and you understand them, and you come to terms with them, and you're able to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Riz Skibbity, Connor Parrott in chat. So true in Ohio. Very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also like, okay, so would Jordan Cooper, I mean, this standard applied to like male sexuality is not applied to female sexuality.
Oh, of course not.
No, I mean, now I kind of don't care in a sense where I'm not here. Like, I think it's very feminine to like point fingers and call things unfair.
Yeah.
Especially when you're doing it to women. Like, I think that's very kind of grotesque.
Yeah. And they're also 100% put off by it too.
Yeah.
It's like, hypocrisy, thy name is woman, like it doesn't matter. You can point it out to them, until the cows come home, and it's not going to change, anything about it, which is why, again, I have such issues with like the MGTOWs and the men's rights people who do nothing but just endlessly complain about like what the women are doing right now.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Are you back, Ryan?
Yes. Hello. We will have to find out about where we were. I think it was just past the 2/3 mark, maybe.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, so I'll trust that you guys finished off the point I was making there, and we'll jump right back in.
Yeah.
Logical
Jonathan,
outcome.
Good job.
Awesome.
Comes for children. It's clear, and in young Christian women, is that on both sides there are significant difficulties in finding a spouse. There's a fear that.
Did we hear this part yet?
Yeah, he's about to talk about the pornography addicted guys.
Okay, yeah, this is right before that. Okay.
They'll never get married. And on the side of the different values, your relationship is probably not going to work out very well. So I see this with young men, that they simply can't find women who really share their values or who will give them honor or respect. But then on the other hand, I speak often with young women, Christian college-age women, who say that they really want to get married. They desperately want to get married. Some of them, that's their highest goal in life, is to get married. But they simply cannot find a man who is not addicted to porn. That is a reality also that we have to face.
This is one point that we didn't bring up here, but this just came back to me right now. The word addiction is used very, very loosely right here. There's not a guy on planet Earth that is addicted to pornography if he's having sex IRL, all the time to fulfill that urge. This is ridiculous.
That's a great point as well. It's like it's like saying that they're addicted to lust. Which you can speak of it that way, but there's a way in which it's not an addiction or even a bad thing, and it's, at least in the Christian perspective, it's within the confines of marriage. God forbid Christians would promote marriage for such a purpose.
Well, nobody has ever committed a robbery, to get a porno mag, but people absolutely have committed robberies to get drug money.
Right, and so this is the only way that you can call this an addiction is in like the most basic like psychological sense, and in that there's like certain attributes of pornography that don't exist in sex that are that like incentivize you to continue looking. But even then, I think that would be a very tenuous argument. I don't know what the specific difference would be other than like perspective. So we'll keep going then, because I think we're about where we left off.
You don't just get to blame the women, because that's a huge problem. And you don't get to say, well, too bad, that's not a big deal. You got to be with the guy anyway and just deal with the fact that he's just constantly looking at other women. So there are issues on really both sides of the aisle here that we do have to deal with. So what can we do then? Well, what we can do is help people to understand the tools that they need to have a good marriage.
Funny that he should use that language. The tools that one would need.
Yeah, I don't know. Can this guy tell me about covert contracts, the scoreboard? Can he tell me about fogging, amused mastery, agree and amplify? Like these fantastic techniques that you could use in a marriage. No?
I mean,
who would have
if
thought?
if only there was a group of people centered around just developing tools.
Yeah, damn this thing,
So, well, let's see what he has to offer. Let's see if he this innovated concept is really useful. Let's see how useful it is.
If you know people whose values align, and they don't know each other, and they're around the same age, and you think they would be a good couple, try to help them to find somebody and get them the tools that they need to have a successful marriage. So
what are the tools, Cooper?
What are they?
What are they? Also, who cares if they have the similar values and interests?
Exactly.
Who cares?
Like, I guess that if we wanted to be very charitable, we could say that he's like he's saying don't put like a Christian and a Muslim together. Like, I guess that you can take values in that sense, but why not just say don't religiously mix marriages? Why say same values? They're
Exactly.
different things.
Well, because the idea here is, and this comes down to when guys are almost always talking about this stuff, they treat when we were talking about earlier about how men are treated as defective women. Well, this kind of advice right here is treating women as defective men. It's like, oh, do they have the same values? Implying that like the woman is going to be held to the standard of those values, and therefore the relationship is going to blossom and such. It's like, no, that's not how it works. It's not the values they're going to keep the woman on a leash, so to speak. It's going to be how like skilled the man is at leading the relationship. That's what it comes down to. The values, like, if this were the case, right? If the values that he's talking about here are the ones that keep the marriages intact here, then why would there ever be a divorce in a Christian marriage ever? Like, if it's all about the values, like, it's not what it is.
Right. The only argument that you could do to save it at that point is just take this Calvinistic, well, I guess they weren't really Christian after all since the marriage ended, which is a really a sort of dumb post hoc rationalization. So let's continue. Is he going to tell us what these great tools actually are?
The reality is, and I see this because I'm a pastor, so I've married plenty of people. I've done plenty of premarital counseling. The reality is that the majority of people who are willing to use the tools that are going to create a healthy marriage, who are committed to marriage as something.
Yeah.
Okay.
We keep. So this is he did the same thing last week. Whenever we were going through his videos on conservatism, he kept throwing out these ideas of tyranny and oppression without actually defining what they were, and he kept basing ideas off of them. This seems to be a common theme in what he does. He never actually defines these very important concepts that he's trying to talk about they're very material to what's being discussed. Oh, we're going to solve the marriage problem for young men by giving them the proper tools. Okay, great. That's the logical implication of saying you're going to solve a problem. So what are the tools? Do we get to hear what they are? Let's keep going, or is he going to change subject?
Something that is inherently lifelong that they simply cannot just back out of, and of course with the exceptions that are there in terms of total infidelity or some kind of serious physical abuse or something, but generally understanding that this is not a kind of optional thing, and they're willing to communicate. They have the tools that they need. They're both committed to working through the problems they have. The people who have those tools,
magic words.
How is that unique to Christians right there? It's like, oh, you want to work through your issues and work through your values, and you want to communicate. It's like, what do any of these words mean? Like, first of all, men and women communicate very, very differently. So that's like your first problem right here. It's like, okay, well, people want to work through their issues. It's like, well, okay, magic, wow, amazing.
This is a strange thing as well, because he's it's as if Christians being married are and the problems that the Christian marriages face are fundamentally different from like a common law marriage in the modern day, as if all these problems are uniquely affecting Christians, and that's not the case. Marriage in the total encompassing sense is what has dissolved. Like, I think all of us can agree on that. So the solution isn't just going to be some going to be some magical Christian solution. It's going to have to be a solution that solves what happened to marriage, secular, religious, and whatever else. And this goes back to the other thing as well. This is partly also why just being Christians and pretending to live 150 years ago isn't going to solve the problem either. Because what you've done, you've effectively put a big red button in front of a woman to where she can not only just separate from the man legally, but also financially ruin him at any time that she so pleases. What do you expect to be the result of that? This, once again, this isn't saying that it's the only problem, but the legal structure certainly is not helping. And in fact, one might even say that the legal structure is actively incentivizing things to go wrong.
Yep.
So, are we going to find out what these tools are? Let's see.
And are committed to them are generally going to make their marriage pretty successful. Are things always going to be perfect? Of course not. That's not how any social institution works. That's not how life works. We're sinners and we live in a fallen world. So that's just the reality of things. So we need to...
Okay, but the perfect is not what we're after here. We want a working system like we had a few generations ago. There's no reason to bring up the is it going to be perfect argument. The person who thinks that that's an actual counter argument to any solution should be excluded from the discussion, quite honestly.
Yeah, is there like any legitimate advice here? You know, it's like, tell me one thing when the woman comes home at the end of the day and starts talking about something. It's like, come on. She starts an argument. She hits one of your kids. She is withholding sex. Anything. Come on, give me one thing.
Yeah. Or how are you proactively going to deal with it? What are these tools to make sure that these problems just don't come up in the first place? Are you going to tell people how to be like good and effective husbands and leaders within the family?
Oh, well, Ryan, don't you know you just have to communicate? You know, you just got to talk to her. Come on.
Yeah, just talk, bro. Like that
Well,
talking to women always solves problems 100% of the time.
We just know that women love to be talked to, and they're such good listeners, and they internalize every word that comes in to their brains. They're just perfect in this regard.
Even just saying communicate isn't actually like proposing a solution either. You guys are just extrapolating what he can mean by it. He hasn't actually demonstrated or reasoned out what is the solution. All right, Cooper, what are the tools?
To move away from these reactionary responses of just saying don't get married. If nobody gets married, it's literally going to just completely destroy society.
So once again,
well, okay, we're arguing against something that like 3 people on the internet are saying. Who cares? That's not the problem.
And this is the other thing as well. Reactionary. It's a reactionary response. That's why all of these men, to the point, so many of them, to the point where Cooper has made this video talking about how pervasive the problem is. They just organically came across this solution of marriages. Something's gone terribly wrong, and they're really considering whether or not they want to get married at all. That doesn't sound reactionary to me. That sounds like a natural result from the current legal system that we have, and from the current social and religious system that we have. I don't think that's reactionary. To be reactionary right now would be to say, oh, well, there's this group of people that is potentially not going to be marrying because of... to be reactionary is to say, well, there's this group of people potentially foregoing marriage. So what we really need to do then is to encourage marriage as much as possible. Just get married. The more marriages we have, the better it'll be. That's the reactionary position here. That is a knee-jerk reaction not based on any sort of logical reasoning or any sort of factual reality. It's not natural. So, let's see. Does he give us these tools? Or are we going to go back to the other thing that we never got an answer to? Is he going to say what's actually wrong with the second wave of feminism? Like he said, decouple childbirth from sex and whatever else. As we've established, we've had that before the second wave. Is he going to answer any of these questions so far? Let's see.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Instead, move toward, we can't escape marriage, so maybe we need to just equip people. Maybe we need to stand alongside people and train them, train our children to understand what marriage is and what a commitment is. And
okay,
really?
Better.
So the issue...
Whoa, people don't know what commitment is. That's why society is collapsing right now.
And my goodness, why don't these great young men just want to commit to the women? Why could that possibly be?
You know, it's almost like a
I don't know, it's almost like a Lenny and Of Mice and Men here. It's just like such a simplistic, description of, the state of play here. It's like that meme. It's like, if only you knew how bad things really were, you know?
Like, but even then, this idea that commitment is the issue is itself just it's implying that the solution is just to man up, commit, you young man. It's a cop out.
This is not what commitment means. Also,
okay. Well, elaborate, John.
Okay. Well, historically, commitment mean basically buying your wife from her father. I mean, it meant that you have ownership of your wife. That doesn't exist anymore. Commitment now means you're putting yourself in enormous financial and legal jeopardy into a contract that could be broken at any moment by another party that you have no way of compelling to not break that contract.
Right. The old system was you would take legal, social, and religious spiritual responsibility over a woman. And, there was this legal system to back that up. Now you take legal responsibility over a woman, and there's nothing in return. And in fact, you have every incentive to break that if you are wanting to be amoral.
Yeah, exactly. You can overlap this with like somebody like Bronze Age pervert would say that, the institution of marriage was originally developed as societies became more agrarian and as property came about. Men had to have some sort of stake in the game as to how their societies would function and everything like this. And one of the ways you could do that is by intermarrying between different groups of guys. You also, like, the incentive there as well is for the father to give his daughter off to somebody else, because that's one less mouth for him to feed. But also at the other side of the equation here, the guy, the would-be husband here, has the incentive of taking the woman off because he has a sexual desire to fulfill, and he wants a stake in the game, and he wants to pass on his own genes and secure his own property and secure his own lineage here. And if that's just devoid from like the Christian side of things that we're talking about right here, but on the face of it right now, there is just no incentive. You have no stake in the game at all as a guy as to how your society is functioned right now in the marriage system. Like, it's actually entirely a liability for you from a legal perspective.
Exactly. And think back to that older system as well. Not only does the father have one less mouth to feed, he also still has like a very deep connection with his daughter, as any father would. So what happens when you marry off your daughter to some young man, or even some middle-aged man? Typically would be the more established kind if you were doing these politically arranged marriages or whatever else. Well, it's in his reputation is on the line here, depending on how his daughter acts as a wife and a mother. It reflects very poorly on him and potentially the other siblings if that daughter is not successful as a wife and a mother. So there was this built-in system that made sure that not only did you raise your children right, but you made sure that they were doing well after you married them off. That is not there anymore. You marry them off now, and you're just treating it as if you have one less responsibility. Thank goodness.
Well, the other thing too here is that we all know this as well. Let's just call that women kind of live in a different world to what men live in, and this causes a lot of problems, particularly in the younger ages when women are, especially nowadays today, are expected to have their pick of the litter, so to speak, and it's kind of like an analysis paralysis at this point. We often talk about this in the manosphere circles, how like you look at the red pill in the manosphere space, pretty much all of it is about how, guys, you need to self-improve, you need to do XYZ to become successful, you need to do this, you need to do that, change yourself a little bit. But then you look on the opposite side, the female side, it's called female dating strategy. Okay. And basically the entire thing there is populated with nothing more than, you go, girl, you're great, you don't need to change it all, your standards are fantastic, a guy will come around, your prince will come, and everything like this. There's nothing there about actual like improving yourself or becoming a good wife or anything like this. It's just all narcissistic, which is the female nature personified right there.
There's also no shaming mechanism. If your daughter like hoes out, there's no shaming mechanism. Even in the churches, there's no responsibility. There's no sense that you failed.
Exactly. And what this also results in, I remember AA and I did a breakdown of one of these like female TikToker, like dating advice kind of channels. We did this maybe a year or two ago on his channel. And basically all of it is
it trains them to have analysis paralysis, where they're expecting like this perfect guy here, when really, like we were talking about earlier, like the woman will just mold herself to the man that she attaches herself to. So you kind of had this self-selection process back in the day as well, where like the father like could see through the, the issues here. And it's like, oh, well, this guy, he might not be like the, super giga chad kind of guy, but he is going to take care of you. He's going to be a good guy and he's responsible, and now you have issues today where, are you guys familiar with the Tinder swindler? Have you guys heard about this?
I have not heard about it.
No, it sounds funny though.
So there was this guy, this broke maybe like a year or two ago. And basically what this guy was doing, he was on Tinder, and he had like a generic profile kind of deal, and he knew the right things to say. And he racked up over $400,000 from several women in the Los Angeles area because he would just milk them for money. Basically, he would be like the pool boy, basically. And eventually it came out that, he actually wasn't going to commit to any of these women. He was just using them for financial resources and such. And this is the kind of thing, like, the stereotype of like, can women actually be trusted to make their own mate selection choices? The evidence is, especially in the age of dating apps now, the evidence kind of is showing us that maybe that's not the case.
Yeah, fantastic. I was wondering if a female dating strategy was going to be brought up during the stream, because it's
awful.
You never, for all these people concerned about how terrible it is that all of these philanderers are going around and corrupting the good Christian youth while the churches have shown them the true way, you never hear them talk about female dating strategy. It's always red pill and manosphere.
Yeah.
And I am very willing to condemn the female dating strategy, because as you alluded to, you just read it and it's vindictive is all that it is.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's basically, it's misandry is literally what it is. It's just nothing but man hatred.
Right, and it's not just like I hate this specific man or something else. It is it's like they sit around at a table. It's as if they sit around a table and then just try to find the ways in which they can despise masculinity, men, specific men, generally men, or anything else man related. It's if you spend an hour reading that, you'll come away feeling sort of like sapped of your energy. It's a very not because you as a man are going to have your feelings hurt, but just because there's it's pitiful, basically.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's 100% true. And like, this is why, like, again, why I have gripes with people who are just like spending like their time nonstop just complaining about women, saying that they hate them and such. And it's like, listen here, man. Like, if you think you have it rough as a guy, just imagine trying to be a woman here in 2023 right now, where everybody is just doing nothing but blowing smoke up your ass, lying to you at every single step and turn. And then you find yourself like alone and miserable and later in life. It's like, that is horrible. That is awful. Like what happens, and it really, really does suck.
Right. So I think that subject has been dealt with pretty nicely there. So let's see. Will Cooper tell us what these tools are?
Take, if you're someone who is older and is married and has some good advice, maybe take some time to actually communicate with younger people.
Oh, like the married red pill forum? Who would have thought?
Well, okay, we'll discard that for now, RedHawk. The vast majority of advice that especially like older people in churches give is absolutely atrocious. Like I would, to be perfectly honest, if you did the exact opposite of the advice that most older people in church gave you, you would be immoral. Not that you would be much more moral doing what they tell you to do half the time, but you would at least probably last longer in marriage, because this is where you get the advice that if the wife ain't happy, nobody ain't happy.
Happy wife, happy life.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, like boomer males are totally whipped. I mean, that's just true. Like a lot, if you go to church, you're going to meet some whipped boomer males who are totally ruled over by their wives.
Oh yeah,
they have miserable lives. They go and they like turn on like ESPN just to drown out their sound of their wives nagging while they drink like Coors Light.
And these are the people that, like, in front of their children or in front of people at the church, they'll ask their wife for permission to do things. Is that?
Yeah, it's just that.
Is that communicating
everywhere? Yeah,
right. If one reads scripture and comes away with an idea of marriage, is this what it is? I don't think it is. So let's we'll keep going. So, but yeah, that's it's hilarious you bring that up, RedHawk. It's as if a lot of the things that he's talking about have been solved by the people he thinks he's critiquing. But I think he's just come up with a caricature for them. We'll continue. What other great solutions does Cooper have?
My wife and I have younger couples, that are thinking about marriage or are just married, come over to our house very regularly. We love to do this because we think that marriage is extremely important, and we want to encourage people in how to have a good marriage, how to make things function well. So there are plenty of things that we can do, and if you are
what
somebody
advice are you giving them?
Yeah, what are these things?
Subscribe to your Patreon to get like the bonus episode where you tell me like this great advice you give.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you have to be a Justin Sinner channel member in order to find out how to solve your marriage.
Again, like, I mean, I said it before, and we've kind of made this point a couple of times, but it's like, man, the Married Red Pill forum came out and about because, guys weren't getting any advice like this, and they had to go conglomerate on the last place left on the planet where we can actually have a masculine space, the bowels of the internet. And even that now is becoming under attack. You can't have any male space left whatsoever.
Right, exactly, and that's hopefully eventually in the next year we'll be getting into other assaults on male spaces, like say Gamergate. That's going to be a fun anniversary that's coming up. But yeah, back to the original topic here, Dr. Cooper, Jordan. What are these things? What are these tools for which these young people can use? Give us specifics. What is something that these young men can know? This one thing that young men can know going into marriage that will help them. What is it?
Who's married, who's older, maybe instead of just complaining, maybe you should do the work, right? Go find some people that you can communicate with and give them advice. There are so many people that I've encountered, who my wife and I have encountered, who when they started spending time with us said things like, "Well, this is the first time I've seen a healthy marriage." Really someone that was close to them, at least because of their parents or
So Dr. Cooper, what is it that makes the marriage healthy? What is it?
Aunts and uncles and those who are part of their family just didn't have healthy marriages, and because of their upbringing and different factors depending on the person. But there are the fact is there are a lot of happy and healthy marriages, but if we don't go out of our way, those of us who are in a good relationship and feel like we've got some things to say and good, of course we make plenty of mistakes and everybody's going to, but if you don't go out of your way to really encourage and communicate with and build relationships with those who are younger, then they're not going to have anything else. And the fact is, if all you have is a bad model of marriage and say you've had bad relationships and your parents had a terrible relationship, well, what else are you supposed to think? So go out of your way to try to communicate with those people who are younger and build those relationships and just encourage them. So anyway, hope you have found these.
Magical. We don't get an answer to any of it. Who could have seen this coming?
All this is, all he said here is the why. He said no points about the how.
Right, yeah. Or he said things are wrong. Well, brilliant observation, Dr. Cooper. What are you going to do to fix it? What should be done to fix it? What really went wrong?
Is that the whole video?
Yeah, that was it.
Does he not have? Is there nothing else?
We were nearing the end.
Okay, well, I guess you'll have to subscribe to his Patreon.
Marriage is saved. Marriage has been saved. Yeah,
so
I'm in good hands.
That was his outro that he was just getting ready to go into, and I'm cutting that for time. And if for some reason it turns out that he gives all the answers we were looking for in that last 30 seconds, by goodness, we will compare, or we will reconvene at a later date and compare what he has to say to what we think is right. But I do believe that was the outro. So as I promised at the beginning, we have something that is lined up for us. Behind these Hans Feeney tweets are some very interesting commentaries from a person that we'll say who it is afterwards. We'll see what people think of him. I'm sure some people in the audience might recognize who it is. I don't remember if I've actually said drop the name yet on stream, but we're looking at some things that were written a few generations ago about marriage and sex within a Christian marriage.
If I may, Ryan, real quick.
Yes.
I'm going to get a refill on my beverage real quick here. So if you want to like take some time really quick to read super chats or something, I'll be back in 1 minute.
Yeah, that's fine. It's just so when I dropped out, I lost the history of super chats. StreamYard decided that I don't have it, but we do have a couple, and I'm sure John might be able to scroll through the chat and point out the other super chats when I don't get to them.
Okay, yeah, I can.
I'll be right back.
Or unless you need to go have a break as well, John. In which case, that's
fine. Yeah, I'll take like 2 minutes.
Okay, yeah. So for everyone still left here in the audience, this next section isn't going to take too terribly long at all. It's kind of just for shock value, if you will, the fact that someone could have even thought these things once upon a time. So, but as for the super chats, Yeehaw Yenzer, I know this isn't your only super chat that you've given, but for whatever reason, I don't have that history, and if I go to the YouTube or my YouTube studio, I don't have the super chats. So Yeehaw Yenzer for $2, and then his other very generous donations. Thank you very much. He says, they're tools. Tim Keller's Meaning of Marriage. And I actually know a lot of people that use this still, and I know a guy who is working through it right now with his fiance. Just because that's something that churches will use is Tim Keller's Meaning of Marriage still. And it seems to be atrocious. I haven't actually read it, so I'll refrain from making any harsher comments, but I mean, this seems to be what it is. This very sort of soft, evangelical, pious-sounding, just man up seems to be what all the churches have to say to solve marriage. Dan Zammit, I suppose. $10. Thank you very much, sir. He says, do we know which non-Christian source is putting pressure on the LCMS to discipline members? Sorry, it's off topic. Haven't seen you live before. Well, welcome to the live show, Dan. Thank you very much for your donation. As for everything that happened this year, it hasn't even been a year yet. Everything started at the end of January. If you're wanting to know the impetus for a lot of these things, a lot of LCMS pastors claim that they knew within hours of a brand new Antifa front on No Blogs, which they will also admit in the same breath that that's proof enough that it was an Antifa front. They claim that they knew within hours, magically, that there was this hit piece put out against Lutheran fascists in the LCMS, and they took them at their word. So it's not the pastors themselves. They will deny any connections and involvement to the anti-fascists. But somehow they knew people that knew immediately after this no-name blog, brand new, hot off the press, published something about the fascist problem in the Lutheran Church. So no, we don't have names. We don't know who they are. We just know that these pastors that jumped on it almost immediately are but a few degrees removed from them. So do with that what you will. And beyond just the people that are a few degrees removed from them, the churches will use Antifa's information. Whenever I was brought in for questioning my own pastor, and you can see this in the thread that I put up with the recording, he used the Antifa information. Whether he knew it was Antifa's information or not, I do not know. But he was using their information and had accepted it at face value. Because he claimed that Luthemplar, El Templar, whatever he goes by now, Cringe Walker, as some people in our sphere might know him, he claimed that he was also this no Lutheran fascist guy that I would have to dissociate and disavow. The only way that you would say that about him is if you got that information from the Antifa source, because they made that same mistake. And in fact, you can go to the blog post now, and at the very bottom, they have a disclaimer saying, sorry, we got something wrong. They've appended this after the fact. They will say that Luthemplar is not actually Lutheran nor a fascist. So this is a very interesting thing that's being used here. So if you want to know what's putting pressure on the LCMS, the originating source is Antifa, and pastors have jumped on that to purge the more rightward elements. So, but yeah, welcome, Dan. Hopefully you've enjoyed the show today. Those two super chats are all that I have. John, if you don't mind,
which
just
ones
like
did you read?
So the last one came from Dan Zammit.
Did you get Yeehaw Yenzer?
Yeehaw Yenzer was the one just before him. So I worked in reverse chronological. Those are the only two I have.
Read. I'll just read the previous ones.
Yes, go.
Okay, X Evan for $10 says, although not LCMS or Boomer, Jay Coop is a soldier of the LCMS Boomer Industrial Complex.
Yeah. I mean that's very true, especially after last week where he was praising Bill Buckley and all these other containment forms of conservatism.
Let's see. Yeehaw Yinzer for $2 says, "Merry Christmas, everyone."
And Merry Christmas to you, and
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, hopefully this has been an entertaining enough of a send-off right before Christmas. I've definitely enjoyed it. What about you guys here?
It's been fun. Do you want me to keep going, or do you want to go back to the...
I think we can finish out the super chats, and then we'll just read through these quotes, because I don't think we're going to be dwelling too long there.
Okay, Billy Al Bradley left a $10 super sticker.
Yeah, he's been donating pretty nicely. Thank you very much, Mr. Bradley.
Xvon with $5. Dalrock says, "Man up and marry those." I can't say that on YouTube, but very based quote from Mr. Dalrock here. Yeehaw Yinzer for another $2 says, "Good morning, gents." And
All right.
Hello sent a 99-cent super sticker, and that is all the super chats.
Alrighty, yeah, thank you everyone for your generosity, and just to remind everyone, we're not done. We still have the best that we've been saving for last here. I think at the very least. So thank you everyone for your generosity. Those donations are what allow me to do this on a regular basis. And then R. Phillips for a £5 sterling super sticker. Thank you very much, sir, for the generosity. I very much appreciate it. So, if you two are ready now, I think that we're ready to unveil these shocking and evil quotes.
Yeah, let's get into these.
The wrong think. Here we go, right on display. So once again, we'll unless I've accidentally done this and forgotten it, we'll reveal who it is that wrote these at the end of reading them. So this person writes, "The third case for divorce is that in which one of the parties deprives and avoids the other, refusing to fulfill the conjugal duty or to live with the other person. For example, one finds many a stubborn wife like that who will not give in, and who cares not a whit whether her husband falls into the sin of unchastity 10 times over. Here it is time for the husband to say, 'If you will not, another will. The maid will come if the wife will not.'"
It's so funny because we actually have a term for this in the manosphere. We call it the wife gets first crack, but not sole custody of the libido. So,
and once again, we'll reveal who this is, and it might change the context in which you listen to this. So those in the audience,
pretty hardcore manosphere stuff here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You might want to listen back to this once we reveal who and when this was written. So. The next quote on the same topic says, and yeah, here this might give away it's not exactly the manosphere, but pretty close sounding. "Here you should be guided by the words of St. Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. The husband does not rule over his own body, but the wife does. Likewise, the wife does not rule over her own body, but the husband does. Do not deprive each other except by agreement," etc. Notice that St. Paul forbids either party to deprive the other, for by the marriage vow each submits his body to the other in conjugal duty. When one resists the other and refuses the conjugal duty, she is robbing the other of the body she has bestowed upon him. This is really contrary to marriage and dissolves the marriage. For this reason, the civil government must compel the wife or put her to death. And he keeps going. "If the government fails to act, the husband must reason that his wife has been stolen away or slain by robbers. He must seek another. We would certainly have to accept it if someone's life were taken from him. Why then should we not also accept it if the wife steals herself away from her husband or is stolen away by others?" So there we go. This evil incel wrong thinker has just said that the government should compel wives with threat of death to give in to their husbands. And here we go. What about adultery? We haven't really talked about adultery directly during this stream, so we'll touch on it here just a little bit. This man writes, "But a public divorce whereby one, the innocent party, is enabled to remarry, must take place through the investigation and decision of the civil authority, so that the adultery may be manifest to all, or if the civil authority refuses to act, with the knowledge of the congregation, again in order that it may not be left to each one to allege anything he pleases as a ground for divorce." So he's basically just saying there, make everything public and go through things in sort of like a civil manner so that all the facts are on the table, people aren't just throwing word against word, and he continues. "You may ask, what is to become of the other, the guilty party, if he too is perhaps unable to lead a chaste life? Answer, It was for this reason that God commanded in the law, Deuteronomy chapter 22, that adulterers be stoned, that they might not have to face this question. The temporal sword and government should therefore still put adulterers to death, for whoever commits adultery has in fact himself already departed and is considered as one dead. Therefore the other, the innocent party, may remarry just as though their spouse had died, if it is his intention to insist on his rights and not to show mercy to the guilty party. Where the government is negligent and lax, however, and fails to inflict the death penalty, the adulterer may betake himself to a far country and there remarry if he is unable to remain continent. But it would be better to put him to death, lest a bad example be set. Some may find fault with this solution and contend that thereby license and opportunity is afforded to all wicked husbands and wives to desert their spouses and remarry in a foreign country. Answer: can I help it? The blame rests with the government. And then on the next page it continues, the blame rests with the government. Why have they not put them to death? So there we go. This is a man, obviously not in biblical or even Roman ancient times, arguing that the government should carry the death penalty for a spouse that commits adultery. And like we mentioned earlier in the stream, this is not adultery as in you've committed lust in your own heart. This is the physical act. You have eschewed your marriage vows by having sex with someone whom you are not married to. So pretty shocking, right, guys? I don't think certainly not any traditionalist conservative would really advocate any of these positions today.
This is not friendly for conservative media. I don't think I'd be invited to talk at Stephenville if I said this.
Exactly. And so what do these quotes actually mean here, like in the context of today, right? We all know that like none of the churches, none of the traditional conservative institutions are actually going to enforce any of these quotes that we're saying here right now. So where does that actually put you as a guy? Does that mean like, oh, you're going to go on like rules lawyer and pull out these quotes in front of like the girl you're seeing or your wife or something to make her comply? No, it doesn't. So it means that you have to adapt yourself to the situation at hand by using different tools than other people would have in the past, because maybe in previous times these rules were actually enforced in certain communities. They're not going to be reinforced today, so you have to act accordingly.
Certainly, yeah. Don't forget that. And part of the reason that I bring this out is not just for the shock value, and this will reveal who it is that wrote this, but especially for Lutherans. It shows that these modes of thinking aren't actually anti-Christian, really. In fact, it's pretty well reasoned from Scripture. All of these sections, why it is one should do this. A lot of the chat was guessing maybe Calvin, maybe Luther, and it is a Luther quote. This comes from his sermon. This was preached in a church on the estate of marriage, and this is from his section where he's going through the causes for divorce, rather. And you have 3 causes that he gives. One is impotence, basically. Someone is unable to produce children, and that's something that they both want, so you can divorce for that reason. And then Luther gives these other 2, adultery, because the person is effectively already dead, and then just obstinance, refusing to fulfill the conjugal duty. Those are the 3 reasons that Luther gives for divorce. And I have a feeling that if I were to go into a church and say that I believe these things, I probably would not be communed there. But you can at least take heart, you Christians listening to this, that at one point in time, this was acceptable enough that Luther got up in front of a congregation and preached this as a sermon, as to what is morally right. So, on top of just the pragmatic argument, or not even pragmatic, the reasonable argument that RedHawk and everyone else on the panel has put forward, that you have to adapt to how things are. You can't just pretend that changes haven't happened. You can at least rest assured that Martin Luther, I guess, for whoever that's worth to you in the audience, thought like this. He thought that this was the moral, the should, the ought to be. So if what you may have to do in the modern day is seems outlandish or crazy or perhaps blackpilling to you, just keep in mind it's probably not as outlandish and crazy as what was supposed to be done 500 years ago. This is a constant battle, one might even say, trying to get for what's right. So that's all that I had today. We are at 3 hours. I don't think we can do very much else here. So
yeah, I think we did a pretty good job.
Yeah, me too. Do either of you two have any final thoughts there before we go to shilling and advertisement and whatever else?
I guess the only final thing I would say to anyone in the chat here who might have some questions here as to, how you can actually deal with some problems that you might be having in your relationships and such. If you want to go at it from a more Christian perspective, I recommend looking at a guy by the name of Dalrock. I posted his name in the chat here earlier, so you guys can look at his old blog. He was a manosphere guy who came from a explicit Christian perspective, and he was married. I think it was either 3 or 4 kids. I forget how many he had, but so you can take a look at his stuff. If you want to, just look at the material as it is wholesale and then figure out what it is that you actually, want from your relationships and such, I recommend my buddy Ryan Stone. I think he's the best guy in the entire sphere right now who's staying on message and actually talking about his work. And, one of the beautiful things that Ryan does, particularly in his books, is that he does a lot of the how. I was talking before about like there's the why. Like somebody like Rollo Tomasi is really good at the why. Like, why is it that women behave this way? Why is it that women's nature is like this? Why is it that men's nature is like this? But Ryan will actually go through and talk to you about the how. He's the guy who will break down like case studies on like the married red pill forums and say, well, this is why certain tactics in this situation may help you and certain tactics in this situation may not help you. So I recommend Ryan's work.
Alrighty. John, do you have any last thoughts before we go to shilling and all of that?
Yeah, like this canard that like men hate women is just very silly. That's not true at all. Men love women, actually. And their desire for women is what allows higher forms of civilization to exist. Yeah, that's my take.
Fantastic. I'm sure that will probably too radical for any traditionalist conservatives. I will never not laugh at people in the modern day calling themselves traditionalist conservatives, just reading at what was considered basic knowledge about marriage that we just read, at least in Germany. And for people wanting to know, Dalrock, that is the person that RedHawk just mentioned. He dropped the name in the chat once again. I believe he is the one that had some pretty interesting things, not just about like red pill stuff, but also like history. Wasn't he the one that wrote the Amelia Earhart article and the transatlantic flight stuff? Or is that someone else?
He might have. I have to look it up. Like, there's a lot of guys in our space that are pretty intelligent dudes, so I wouldn't be surprised by that at all.
Yeah. So, I could be wrong about that, but I am fairly certain I've came across him before, and I don't remember. Just I kind of remember liking reading it. And last super chat to come in once again from Dan Zammit for another $5. Thank you very much, sir. He says, doesn't the Bible say you can't remarry after a divorce and only one situation given for divorce? So this is a topic to where if you ask different theological traditions, you'll get different answers. Obviously, as you can see by what Luther just wrote, his answer would be that the Bible does not say that. John, being as you're in the Roman Catholic Church, I think he might have a different answer.
Yeah, it depends on which synoptic gospel you follow. There's a different answer. Luke has a slightly different answer on that, and that's why there's been two historical schools. And then there's like the modern evangelicals who have no standards at all and just say you can get divorced whenever. But that's a different thing.
So, yeah, so that would be I think that would be a topic for its own, especially considering we're running up on 3 hours and 10 minutes. So thank you, both of you, for joining me. RedHawk, where can people find you? Because I think I have your Find My Friends linked in the description, but what are you doing? Where can people see your work?
Yeah, perfect. So you guys can, at my Find My Friends link, you'll find my own personal Substack. You'll find my Twitter account and my own personal YouTube channel here. Man's Hour is typically on Thursdays. I've taken a break the last month or so at the end of the year here, but I will be back in the new year. And then, of course, you can always find most of my work these days at the Old Glory Club. Last night we did a fun stream. We watched Die Hard on stream together with Charlemagne, Raging Mandrill, and Marcus, Furious Pertinax. So that was tons of fun. Pony Express Radio is on Thursdays at the Old Glory Club. So that's where you can find all my stuff. And thanks for having me, Ryan. This is a great topic.
Oh, yeah, and thank you very much for showing up. This was I thought this would be the perfect discussion and a perfect panel for it. And also, for people that are interested in looking at the Old Glory Club, I was reliably informed that the Pony Express Radio episode that went out this Thursday was seminal, perhaps, in the history of the show.
It was really funny. Yeah.
So I might encourage everyone to go check that out. Check out the Old Glory Club, not just because all three of us on this panel are affiliated with it in some way, shape, or form, but just because I genuinely enjoy the content that is put out, even when I'm not the one doing it, as if I'm supposed to enjoy my content more than the others. So, John, where can people find you?
You can find me at my YouTube channel, Knights of Dissent, which will be linked in the description. You can also read my articles on the Old Glory Club. All of them are free. And that's pretty much it for me.
Yeah, and don't skip the John articles either. They are some of the most hilarious things that we have published on the OGC. He just recently had an article called was Mordor and Isengard go to war.
Yeah.
And it is about as lighthearted of an assessment that you can get. Lighthearted and very pressing assessment over the Harvard Semitic, anti-Semitic stuff that's going on. I highly recommend you give it a read. It was a very enjoyable thing to read. So, yeah, go check out John and RedHawk, and then Turnip's Digest will actually be reconvening this next Saturday. We will be starting very early in the morning. Let me just double check my time. I will be here with Grant Brooks, who is also from the Old Glory Club. We will be discussing the John Birch Society and what happened to them. Were they good? Were they bad? Did they get things right, wrong? That will be, I believe, starting at 7 a.m. Central. So that's going to be a very early morning stream for those of us who enjoy the Protestant work ethic and getting no sleep and only producing. So be ready for that. That will be on the 30th, next Saturday, and I will see you all then. So thank you guys for joining me, and have a good day, everyone in the audience.